be able to be used by both Concom and the Planning Board. It should be coordinated such that information needed by both boards and commission is addressed and provided. Confirmation should be obtained from the Planning Board that basin number 2 can be located within the 50-foot building setback area. Profiles of all off-road pipe runs should be shown on the plans. There appears to be an existing drain pipe running under detention basin 1 location, which is proposed to be used and to remain. This pipe should be shown on the basin 1 detail, and it should be verified through cameraing or other methods that this pipe is open, intact, and free-flowing. The full-size pre- and post-development watershed plans, complete with TC flow arrows as well as piping plans, should be forwarded to this department for use and review. An additional soil test pit should be performed in the area of Basin 2, as there currently not one there. Each detention basin should have the basin elevation shown on the cross-section along with the actual depth to season high groundwater. The name Mass Soil Evaluator responsible for the soil test pits should be provided to this department. Typically, engineering must observe the test pits, and no such observation was made as no request was made. Soil test pit location should be shown on the grading and drainage plan. The developer's engineer should address for the run of pipe between FES to DMH9 to DMH10 to DMH11 to existing pipe. There is a 24-inch pipe to a 24-inch pipe to an 18-inch pipe connecting to an existing 18-inch RCP, which appears to go under the detention basin. Typically, a pipe is not downsized in this manner. Are you familiar with this letter?
Yes,
You
sir.
have that? Okay.
We received those letters.
All right. And there's a letter that need to be read into the record.
That's a letter from, I would just read that you've received the letter from Harshon Village.
Okay. There's a letter that's been sent to Conservation Commission dated March 13th from the Hartshorn Village Condominium Association, and it references this project. So it is in our file if anyone is interested in that. Some, looks like some might pertain to conservation and some to planning board. Okay.
We have not received a copy of that letter.
I have to step
And we
down
don't
here.
have it either,
Okay.
do we?
No,
We don't have
I'll
it in
stepping
front of
down.
us.
I did not make copies of that particular letter for everybody, no?
But should we hear what
You wanna,
pertains to conservation?
If you want to read it.
you
yeah.
wanna hear it? All right. Just make note that Amy, that Al has stepped down.
Okay, yeah, fine.
After reading the available planning documents and considering the implications of the Pulte project, the board members of Hartshorn Village Condominium have identified areas of concern that we believe will negatively impact our 29 townhouse homes with basements. Planned project abuts our property on the west and north as noted on the plans drawn up by Matthew Leidner, PE, for Pulte Homes. A number of our units already have experienced water problems, making our concerns mostly with the water table, ground runoff, and rearrangement planned for the drainage system. Please note the following. During demolition and construction period, the present drainage and water flow around our property will be altered. The bordering vegetated wetland, specifically wetland A, as noted on the plans, will be altered. Therefore, the grading and drainage plan need to protect our property from damage. Related to this concern is the bank for wetland A, as any interference and changes to the bank will leave our units at risk. The flow of water already slopes toward the back of the condo units, which have only dry wells for water runoff. Notice of intent document states this is a buffer zone only project and no wetlands are proposed to be permanently altered. Our concern is who will be monitoring this and what efforts will be made to restore our protection from any additional water flowing towards our property. Lastly, our concern is traffic, which isn't our issue. So those are what pertains to conservation. You can get a copy of this from our office.
Okay, I just did from somebody in the audience as well.
You have a
so-
copy. Okay, so you're all right on that. Okay. And representing the applicant,
Yes, sir. Representing the applicant, my name is Mark Mastriani. I'm here from Pulte Homes of New England. And with me tonight is also Reed Blue in the second row from Pulte Homes as well. Matt Leidner, standing to my right, is with Civil Design Group. He's the engineer of record and helping us through the process. I know you're standing there. Where would you like us to set up? We have some boards, presentation boards. Matt's going to use for his presentation. Is there a specific location?
Side of the podium, please. Facing that way. Facing that.
we need this so we can see it, whatever you're going to be pointing to. And I believe if you're showing it on there, will it show up on the back?
As long as they're relatively in the middle, yeah.
Okay, so anybody in the audience, if you want, you can reference the screen in the back.
And also here with me is Meredith Borenstein. She's with SWCA Environmental Consultants. Her firm was involved in the submittal and preparation of the notice of intent that's before you, and also the delineation of the wetlands that we perform. So I'll just take a few moments to say a few words before Matt gives the real detailed presentation of our proposal. But, you know, like you mentioned, we're here for our NOI submittal for the property at 767 and 777 East Street. It is the home of the current Walpole Woodworkers facility property. We're also at this time before the planning board. We have submitted for our special permit approval from the planning board, and we've opened up that hearing. We've had one hearing so far, so we'll be running the two reviews concurrently. We did get a copy of most of all of those comment letters that you read into the record, and we have started to look at them and review them, and we do plan on submitting a comprehensive review response to all of the comments. This is a redevelopment of a degraded commercial industrial site. I think there's great environmental benefits to our proposal that I hope we can convey to the commission tonight. Prior to submitting the NOI, we've been diligently meeting with the various department heads in town, working on creating and preparing the plan. We've met with fire and police and engineering. We've met with the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners. We've met with the old planner that just left, the new Economic Development Director. We've also met with the town manager several times. And this project, this development is a party to a development agreement that Pulte Homes has entered into with the Board of Selectmen. And this project that Matt will be presenting to you is definitely in compliance with our commitments and agreements with the Board of Selectmen. So we're excited about this project. We think it has many benefits to the town and specifically to the Conservation Commission and the environmental values of the property. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt, and he can really walk you through the site and the proposal. Thank you.
Matt, if you're going to refer to specific sheets in your presentation, will you tell us what sheet you're on so we can pick the same one?
Absolutely. So good evening, Commission members. For the record, Matt Leidner with Civil Design Group, civil engineer for the project, representing Pulte. And I'll bring you through an overview of the project, and happy to answer any questions point. So what you see here, these two sheets, we have a rendered version of the site plan that was submitted, which is sheet 5 of the plan set. And the plan to the right, which is an existing aerial photo, was not one of the submitted plan sheets. It's just an exhibit for tonight, just to give you a frame of reference for what's out there. The site is approximately 15.8 acres in size. It's located on the north side of East Street. This is East Street running along the bottom of the page here, and Kendall Street up here. So we have frontage on both streets. The white line here, that's the property line. Goes around the site. And as you can see in the existing aerial on the right side, as you look at these two boards, the site is a degraded industrial site. It's the current Walpole Woodworkers site. There's industrial buildings, industrial activity, stockpiles of materials. There's just a lot of industrial use going on the developed part of that site. There are 2 wetland systems on site. One is located on the east side of the site, over here, and the wetland lines, I took a marker and marked them in black on that plan over there, just so you could see them. So there's a wetland right here on the east side, the southeast corner of the site, and then there's a wetland that runs up the west side of the site and then kind of wraps the north side here. So this whole area in here is also wetland area. And between the 2 wetland areas, we have this upland area, which is where the current development exists, and where we're proposing to redevelop. The drainage on the site, the existing drainage is such that the easterly wetland here is higher in elevation and flows into the westerly wetland. There's currently a culvert that exists. There's a head wall right about here and a culvert that runs westerly and then discharges to the wetland on the west side, on our property, but on the west side of the development area. So it's carried by a culvert from the east side to the west side. There was an ORAD that was issued for this site several years ago. I believe it expired around 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And we were able to obtain that wetland line, and we went out and we back surveyed the flags from that old line in the field. And New England Environmental then went out there to look at that delineation. And they did make some tweaks to the flags when they went out there. And the tweaks they made were such that the wetlands increased in size. But substantially the same line as the previous ORAD, with some tweaks to increase the size of the wetland. So after those adjustments were made, we went back out and surveyed the adjusted flag locations. And so that is the line that's shown on the plans that you have in your submission. And part of the submission, besides the plan set and the NOI, was a comprehensive wetland report that New England Environmental, or SWCA, I'm sorry, had prepared for the project. What we're proposing here on the left side is 186 units that are housed within 4 buildings. Each building is 4 stories of living over a parking garage. 3 of the buildings, buildings 1, 2, and 3, each have 50 units in them. And then building 4 up here is a slightly smaller building with 36 units. And those total 186 units. They are all 55 and over units. They'll all be for sale units. No rentals are proposed for the project. The main access being proposed is off East Street, right here, full access driveway directly across from Eastover Road. And this is where the existing Walpole Woodworkers driveway is today. So it's in that same location. And we have proposed a connection out through Kendall Street. However, after meeting with various town staff and getting feedback leading up to this point, we have proposed that as a gated emergency access. So it would not be used by the residents. It would only be for emergency town personnel to be able to access the site out to Kendall Street. So some of the layout considerations that we took into account for designing the project were, of course, the wetland areas, also the terrain and the topography of the land. So the site does climb as you go from East Street. It actually drops in as you come in from East Street, but then it climbs as you go up toward Kendall. So we took that into account with the way we graded the buildings and the entrances to the parking garage and such to limit our extent of grading to catch up, if you will, to the existing grade and limit the overall limit of work. We also took into account the fact that much of this area is degraded today, so we tried to stay within that current developed footprint, that industrial development footprint, to the extent that we could. And as you can see on the two photos, we're primarily within it, other than a small area up here toward Kendall Street in this part of the site. We are proposing, as part of this project, some temporary wetland disturbance, and I have some photos here. I'm just going to put this board up. So the picture on the top left represents the standing right about here, looking north. So looking north, there's an existing fence, as you can see in this photo, and primarily the wetland line and the fence line are the same line, so the wetland runs along the fence. But in this southern area here, I dashed in black here the wetland line, so the wetland actually kicked out here, and to the left is the developed part of the site. So we are proposing to go into this little area of wetlands here to remove the fence. We'd like to remove the fence and not replace it, just remove the fence. So we would do that and then back out of that area and reseed, revegetate as necessary, and just let it go back to a natural state. The other area where we're proposing an even smaller amount of temporary disturbance is the culvert. As I mentioned earlier, there's a culvert that runs from the easterly wetland on site to the westerly wetland on site and carries the water beneath the developed area. And we are proposing to realign a segment of that culvert because our proposed building interferes with it. And so as part of that project, we would like to go all the way to the upstream end of that culvert because if we didn't, we'd only be leaving maybe 20 feet of it in place. So what we'd like to do is go to the upstream end of that culvert and then replace that whole segment. The pictures here, this picture here is a picture looking, I'm standing over top of the culvert, looking back upstream toward the head wall, which is here. You can't see it in this photo, but this is looking the other way. That's the culvert right here. This is the head wall. The head wall is essentially just some loose field stones just piled up there. So if we do anything with that pipe, it's essentially just going to fall apart. So we're proposing to go in, remove that, and build our realigned pipe with a true flared end on it to take the water and route it through the site. The nice part about this is that since we're diverting it around what will be the new building, we're not just replacing it in the same exact alignment that it's in now. We can construct the new pipe and have it become functional before we remove the old pipe. So, we have that ability because we are realigning the pipe. We estimate that the temporary wetland disturbance associated with the fence up in this area is about 800 square feet. And again, it's just to the extent necessary to remove the fence, and that's it. And we estimated about 25 square feet, if that, for the culvert replacement. The other item to consider with the culvert is, besides getting the existing head wall out and the new one in, the actual culvert from there downstream is in an area that's already disturbed. It's in the developed area. So it's really just, in terms of wetlands impacts, just the head wall itself, that replacement that would involve any sort of temporary impact. We're also proposing some work within the 25-foot no disturb zone. However, we're only doing that to restore the 25-foot no disturb zone back to a natural state and remove some of the materials that are currently in that area. We don't need to go into it to accommodate our grading and the development. We would like to go into it to pull back what's in there now and then revegetate it and let it be become naturalized. So I have some photos of that as well. This sheet here represents the A-series wetland, which is the wetland on the westerly side of the site here. And so all 4 of these photos are taken in this area here. And on the top right photo, the wetland is off to the right side. And these orange stakes here represent the 25-foot no disturb zone. And as you can see, some of these stockpile materials encroach into it in that area. This is the same area looking the other direction. So here's an orange stake here. But back here, these materials here are all in the 25-foot no disturb zone. Same thing down here. This area here is actually at the southwest part of the site, right in this area. There's actually an existing gravel parking area that goes into the 25-foot no disturb. So we'd be removing that and vegetating it. These photos here are of the along the easterly side, so this is wetland series B, and the 25-foot no disturb associated with that wetland. So this is probably the worst area in terms of what's in the no disturb zone on the site. So you can see all this is in the 25-foot no disturb, all these stockpile material and vehicles, a little bit of everything in there. So
Excuse me, where is that on the,
that is over in this area.
okay, thank you.
So again, we'd be proposing, and this actually in the background here, you can see that fence back there. That's that fence that we're proposing to remove, part of which is in the wetland, the rest of which runs right along the wetland line. So you can see if that's the wetland, this is all in that first 25 feet here. So again, proposing to go in there, remove the fence, remove all the junk, revegetate, and let it go natural. This over here, these 2 bottom photos pertain to the same wetland, the B-series wetland over here. But whereas the top 2 photos were in this area, the bottom 2 photos are up here on this northern leg of it. And it's a little bit better up there. So you can see there's some debris, there's some junk in there, but not as bad as the top 2. So the plans propose a little bit less work in that area. So we would go in, we would remove whatever's in there in terms of material, but you can also see there's some saplings, some trees, shrubs. We would propose to leave all that, not go in and clear all that, just leave all that, and then whatever disturbance we do in that area to remove the junk, we would spot treat, we would spot seed an area or stabilize and that type of thing. So I just wanted to give you a flavor for there's a couple different scenarios out there that we have to contend with. And we did go out and walk the site with SWCA, and we've surveyed these areas, and we feel that we've really well delineated the areas that are going to be just full revegetation like these versus more of a spot treatment like this. And that's all detailed on the plans, and specifically the landscape sheets It's the L series sheets at the end of the plan set. We are proposing a pretty comprehensive stormwater management system as part of this project to meet all of the applicable DEP and local stormwater standards. And you can see the darker green areas on this rendering here. So this here, and then this over here are infiltration basins that we're proposing. So what we're proposing to do is collect the water. All the site driveways and parking lots will be curved and graded to catch basins, deep sump-footed catch basins for the initial treatment, and routed through water quality units. We're proposing contact units on this job. We work with contact to size those units appropriately for the area of runoff that they're receiving, and then infiltrate as much as we can. And each of the basins has an overflow, which then is directed out toward the wetland areas, which is where the water goes today. So we submitted a comprehensive drainage report, calculations, and narrative along with our submission to the commission. And I'd really like to just emphasize how much of an improvement the proposed stormwater system is over the existing, which is basically non-existent in the existing addition. So what you have out there today is rainwater coming down, hitting this industrial yard, running off, and not being treated, and no detention or infiltration, just running off into the wetlands. So the improvement in terms of water quality and detention and infiltration is really going to be tremendous with the new with this proposed project. So just to recap, as you know, we submitted the notice of intent to your commission. We're also before the planning board at the moment with a special permit and site plan review application, actually 2 applications, one for special permit, one for site plan review. As Mark had mentioned, we've worked with town staff to arrive at this point. We've had a lot of meetings and discussions, and we went to a design review committee meeting and got feedback there. We are in receipt of the comments that you read into the record, but for the one from the abutting condominium association, which we just did receive. So we're in the process of going through those comments and preparing responses to those comments. We do understand the stormwater design will be peer reviewed, so we look forward to that process and are happy to work with the peer reviewer in the town through any issues or comments that come up as a result of that peer review. And just as my final thought here, this site, as I understand it, was a site of some enforcement orders several years ago, and there had been some wetland restoration done as part of those, and we really see this as an opportunity to continue that process landward, that restoration process, and really bring the whole site into compliance with current day regulations, and just kind of breathe new life into the site, and really improve the stormwater runoff quality from the site and hence the wetlands. So we're excited to bring the project before you, and at this point, unless anything else to add, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. For those in the audience, we'll go through the commission with any questions or comments, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I ask you to identify yourself for the record, and just to keep your comments or questions related to conservation issues, as we have just the issues that have just been discussed. Landis?
A couple things. As has already been mentioned, we did put out a request for a proposal for peer review of the stormwater. and we did get back a proposal from John Chesia, which we forwarded to the applicant, and they've agreed with the proposal, and as well as the planning board chair has reviewed it also. So we're going to be moving forward with that. That report should be available around the 20th of April. I haven't been out to the site recently. I was out on the site when they were doing some soil remediation, and previously I was out there during the enforcement and other times that the commission was involved with the site. So I know the wetlands line pretty well. I did pull out the ANRAD wetlands line and looked at your wetlands line, and they seemed about pretty much the same. As you've mentioned, it was tweaked a little bit, but more towards additional wetlands than less. I think the revegetating of the 25-foot no alteration area is a great positive aspect for the wetlands in this area. So that's good. The consultant will be looking at the stormwater as well as the pipe. The only question, and I'm gonna wait to get back the report to see what they say, to really delve into any questions I have about the stormwater and the pipe. My only question now, and maybe it's for the wetland specialist, is it's my understanding, is there another outlet of that wetlands that goes from the other side of East Street? There's a pond, and then there's a wetlands on your side. Is the only outlet of that wetlands the pipe?
That's our understanding. That's,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
And that wasn't classified as anything. It's not a stream, it's just a pipe.
Correct.
So it's your understanding it wouldn't fall under the stream water standard, the standards?
Correct. It's not classified as a stream, and therefore,
All right.
that's correct.
So, just after we get the report, I mean, one of my concerns is just that there's enough capacity to convey all the water, and that's really looked at well. It looked like perhaps you were hooking in the roof drains, or just overflow into that pipe as well, or?
Yes. So we are hooking some roof drains into that pipe, because part of the stormwater design here was to not only to mitigate the rate of flow and treat and meet the standards, but also try to balance the water that's going to various areas. So, so in other words, we didn't want to starve an area that gets water now, just as much as we don't want to send more water there now. So it will never be exactly the same, but we do what we can to try to get the numbers to be as close as possible to existing and not over. So we actually, and again, once the peer review comes in, we can get into further discussion, but we did look at several study points on the west side of this site where water goes today, and we tried to balance that flow to each of those study points. We tried to micromanage it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. So like I said, we'll wait for the report, and that's, obviously I know that the neighbors are concerned with that, as well as the commission is concerned with the balance of the water flow in the site. Other than that, I don't really have any other additional comments. Again, I like the restoration of the 25-foot no alteration area. It seems like you've really tried to compact the development. I'll reserve any questions for later when we get the stormwater report.
Okay. Me?
Yeah, I would just echo Landis's remarks about the 25-foot. I think that's great that you're restoring that. That's excellent. I have a question about the pipe. Where is it right now? Can you show me where it is right now? Is it going to be? Are you replacing it, or are you?
We're replacing a portion of it.
A portion of it.
Yes.
Okay.
The best way for me to show you would be to pull the survey plan out.
Okay.
What sheet are you on?
That's sheet 3.0. So you pipe the head wall, takes the water up, takes the water in each here, passes through the site, and then discharges. The building will sit roughly there. So we're converting it around that building and then coming back into the existing.
And so you said same rate of flow and all that, you've,
Right, so
Yeah.
that pipe doesn't, the portions of water upstream of that head wall that pipe takes, we're not impacting that. So where there's no issue today that we're aware of with flooding upstream of that, or that the ability of that pipe to take flow, we're proposing to put the same size pipe in there as a replacement. We're merely just diverting it around our building.
okay. So,
Jim? Roger?
After the commission.
Well, I'm concerned in a couple of things here. You touched on the pig farm pond, which we used to call it years ago, across the street. And the amount of water that it can collect, and it passes underneath the East Street and into the property. I know that it may be stretching a little bit about the amount of flow that can produce, but nevertheless, that when that pipe is fully charged, it may, I don't know if that is in your calculations or not, a fully charged pipe. We do know that we've had peak flows are increasing, minimum flows are decreasing. And I'm one who's concerned about the peak flows and the sizes of the pipe and all through this whole area. This whole site was basically pretty much a wetland many years ago, long before the woodworkers were there. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but I do. So a lot of this land is basically was pretty much filled in many ways, from basically a lot of wood, cement, stuff that came back from the trucks. Fences they took down, creosote, and things of that nature, which some of it's been mitigated, particularly out in the back along the Kendall Street area. But I'm not sure about the pipe coming in through under East Street, or any of the drainage. Is there any of the drainage from East Street going into the property, other than the surface water that's on the side of the street? In other words, are there any catch basins discharging into that stream?
I believe there are catch basins on East Street out here that discharge into this wetland here? Yes.
Again, that's an area of not only sand, but salt, and all the stuff that comes off of properties. And again, that goes into my discussion about, my concern about peak flows. Because now we have a whole area of high velocity coming down the hill, from the railroad area. And there when Kendall Street goes on to East Street, up and through there. Well, I don't wonder if that is in your calculations. Because that, sure, it's not being developed on your property, but and it's up on your property.
Thank
And as you make more pervious surface on your property, it can cause the problems there. Also, I'm concerned, although it's not jurisdiction, but you're having garages underneath the building, which is a great idea as long as they don't flood. You know, that's a life safety issue and for the elderly people that are gonna be living there. So I was wondering if you want to comment about those things.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for the feedback. We appreciate that. To answer your question regarding the East Street drainage, we did not model any of the upstream East Street drainage in our stormwater model because we're simply just taking whatever water comes down and passing it through our site. So we're not routing any of that into our proposed treatment units or infiltration basins. We're simply just routing it through our site as it goes today. We're happy, and maybe the appropriate time is with the peer reviewer to look at the capacity of that pipe, and if there's any concerns, you know, we can certainly address, you know, work with them to address that at that time. You know, we're happy to do that. To answer your question or respond to your question regarding the basements, that's a great question. And we've set the elevations of the units, the basements of the units, the basement floors to be above the seasonal high groundwater table. So we looked carefully and designed the buildings very carefully relative to groundwater, so that will not happen. So we expect dry basements on this site.
Anything else, Ron?
Well, I remember I wasn't here, but I've seen the pictures of 55 flooding. And I'm always concerned about that because of that, all that water ends up in the wetland. And that causes additional flooding and the handling of it. But anyway, the whole wetland is so very important, particularly in this case, to be able to have it discharged and absorb and put the water back into the ground. I just mentioned as a concern of mine.
Anything else, Ron? Anything else?
Not for this time.
Okay. Betsy?
So it is good then that we're getting the water consultant who, you know, will let this conversation continue. It seems like it's wonderful that you're removing items from the buffer zone and that the overall plan is better stormwater management than what is not happening at all on the site. Is there any, maybe two main questions for you. Is there any further concern about hazardous materials? I mean, there has been remediation and there has been, you know, some oversight by this commission. That's one question. Yeah, okay.
I can answer that one.
Okay.
Simply that the seller, Walpole Woodworkers, is currently in process of working with the DEP to clean up the site and the hazardous materials that are there. And the site will be fully clean with a clean bill of health before it will be, before the land would be transferred to Pulte Homes.
Okay. A second question is about all your snow removal areas. It's a tricky thing after this is all built to keep the snow from being pushed even further. Some of them are like right on the edge of the buffer zone. I'm just wondering if there could be some consideration of maybe not having them quite that close, or maybe some sort of very special signage or barricades or something to make it crystal clear that the snow operators are not to keep shoving the snow forward into the wetland?
We can certainly look at, you know, the areas where we're proposing them. So you saw that there are areas shown on the site
Yeah.
layout plan. Are there specific areas? If
Well,
I
there's
click to
one,
that?
one back near the sewer pump station, and so some of them are actually, you know, pretty close enough that you would wonder if there could be some accidents, if there were a big snowstorm and someone were just kept shoving the snow in that direction. Like on Plan 6.
We can definitely take a look at that and see if we can make some modifications to, you know, to address that concern.
That's it for now.
That pipe that goes under E Street, have you checked that out? That 18-inch pipe, is that functional?
We have not checked that pipe out because we're not sending any water to that area, so it really,
Well, according to the elevations you show, it would flow northerly under East Street into the property, just
right.
near where that culvert is that you're gonna replace.
Right, so it flows under East Street northerly
Right.
to the wetlands on the east side of our site here, and then it gets picked up by the culvert that we're
Right.
proposing to replace. So the capacity of that pipe under East Street is, for lack of a better term, it's irrelevant to our project. Because we're not flowing any water toward it. It's only bringing water onto our site.
My question is, have you considered that if, I don't know how functional that pipe is today, but if it were completely functional as an 18-inch pipe, have you considered that in your drainage calculations for the replacement of that you're going to put in that 24-inch pipe? And also then that goes to the retention, is that retention basin number 1?
That pipe bypasses the infiltration basin. It does not go through that. That pipe just conveys water under the development, essentially. It doesn't
Okay,
discharge
so
into
that
any
discharge, looking at sheet 7, shows the drainage pipe and going into, that's not, I guess my question is, where does that wind up going then?
Can I talk?
You're going under,
Talk into the microphone.
Into the microphone.
Okay. So the existing pipe runs from the head wall here, essentially straight through the site,
okay,
over to here. And by doing that, you can see the proposed buildings in the way.
right,
So we take that existing head wall, what we're proposing to do is replace it with a new head wall at this new alignment, which goes around the bottom of this building,
yeah,
and then comes back up and then hooks back into the existing culvert, which goes the rest of the way. That happens to be under that basin.
okay, so you're
but
going
it's
under,
below the floor of the basin, so it
You're
doesn't
going-
connect into it.
under the basin,
Correct. And then it discharges where it
Into
does
the
today.
wetland.
We're not proposing to touch that, that outfall.
okay. I don't know if that addresses my question. If that pipe were to become fully functional, what effect would that have? And it's going into wetlands, which then, 'cause I don't know if it's fully functional today,
Okay.
and you don't know either.
We don't. We did not take a look at that pipe, because
Okay,
it doesn't.
Because that's picking up a couple of catch basins on East Street.
Right.
Plus whatever would be coming into that wetland across on the south side of East Street. Okay,
Should the consultant be
I
told to
just-
watch it? for that?
I think it should be looked at, because that then would come up to the issue that was addressed in the Butters letter about, from the Hartshorn condominium. If that pipe were to become fully functional, would it put more water into that wetland and have some effect on the Hartshorn development, Hartshorn condominium? Apparently that was part of their concern, was the potential for additional runoff in their direction, which could cause problems to the abutter. So,
Peer review of that.
okay.
Right, so part of the peer review did include taking a look at the pipe, and its effects, replacing it on stormwater. It did include addressing concerns or questions that came up at the public hearing, so we can forward the questions to him. I don't know is your question if in the future someone decides to replace the culvert in East Street or clean it out so it becomes fully functional, would replacing the culvert through the project cause an effect on the abutters?
If that, if that pipe were fully functional, and that's my concern, if that were to become fully functional, what effect would that have? Basically, I thought it was going into the basin, but it's not.
Right, it's not.
It's going under the basin, which then goes to the wetland adjacent to the abutters on the west side. So that would be my question for the consultant, is that, does he see any concern with that? And it should be, his work should include looking at that as a fully functional pipe. Because that may be, I don't know how, I doubt if it's fully functional today. But if it were in the future, it's coming onto your property, which then makes it it's water coming from your property. So I think it should be addressed in, as the consultant reviews that, what effect, if any, maybe it doesn't have any effect if it were fully functional. I don't know. That's.
I think we can pose the question and see what, if it means doing a whole watershed analysis of the water coming into that culvert,
Well,
then that's, I think, is probably beyond the scope of the project. But if to get some kind of, because it could change now without the project, with a fully
Yeah.
functional culvert.
No, I'm just thinking that the potential is there in the future for that to be fully functional. My guess is it is not today. And it drains onto this property.
Right.
So it is, what would happen if that were flowing full? Okay.
We can give it a question to him and see what.
Okay, anyone in the audience has any questions or comments, please identify yourself for the record. Yeah. Can you come up and speak into the microphone? Do we have a,
Okay. I just want to make a couple of clarifications.
And your-
We're not really against.
Your name again?
the Concept.
okay, your name again, please?
Carolyn Wallace.
Okay.
What our concern is what you were just talking about. What people aren't paying attention to is there's a lot of underground water. All right, and that's what's been flooding us. Now, I was the one who complained in around 2007, because I saw Walpole fence encroaching on what was the wetland, which always has an impact on us. And I was told that by the engineer Anderson, who originally did the plans for Walpole for the Hartshorn Village condo in Walpole. Okay? So that, we've talked to him about those kinds of things and how we could protect ourselves, since a lot of us now have sump pumps in and everything else like that. So when he was talking about, and how he put it in the plan, they say there are no perennial streams identified within or proximate to the site. Well, anyone who lives up on the hill knows that as their water from East Street people who are along that line, they're on a hill that goes down the hill into a stream that's bounded by rocks and everything else. It does get overgrown and whatnot, but we have to clean it out so it stays flow. Now, the town knows about that because they came on our property, and there's a huge concrete pipe that's under our driveway that they put in there for the outflow, to take it across the street, over across from Blessed Sacrament Church, to a huge dry well that they constructed, right? It's part of like a sewer system, but also the groundwater that goes there. Also, because it's our concern that if anyone knows about Hartshorn Road and the other property owned by Walpole Fence, there's water going under the ground and comes out and is visible. In fact, I just saw it the other day, that there is the water that flows right there. So there's a lot of, our concern is there's underground water, and now you're gonna also have outflow, and it's all downhill going on to the west side of the property. And I had residents tell me that went to a previous meeting that they asked how close that the things were going to be done, and it's 165 feet from unit number 29, which is the end unit. And our fire road is right next to that, and there's a picture of the dumpster right by the property line. So we're concerned that by disturbing some of it, and I was assured that they weren't gonna be building something underground or anything else like that. And my feeling is, has anyone considered the aquifers that we have? If you've ever seen the downtown pictures of Walpole before they put in some of the Neponset system, there was water all over the place. So again, someone made the comment about one time it was all wetland, and we can tell you that because even in a drought in this area, my pump is still running. Okay, I've replaced it 3 times and I've been here 20 years. Okay, so I just wanted to try to help you to understand, if a little pushback to build some playground stuff caused some disturbance down into our property, can you imagine by building these buildings and having all of that above us, all coming down into what they're saying is, if they would just even walk along that, they could see that stream is still in the wintertime. It still has some little flow going, and it does get more flow during the summertime. So there is a stream there. And I wouldn't have called it perennial, you know, because again, as I said, we see it all the time, and we try to keep it clear so that it will stay and not flood everything.
Can you point out the stream that you're talking about? Is it in the wetlands? Is that what you mean?
That's why I'm saying they've only taken into effect where they're
So
going to be.
it's a stream on their
But there's a
property?
stream. This here is Hartshorn Village condos,
What's this?
all right?
On number
These are
7?
our parking cars that you see in the little site. So what's happening is, over here, where you see the darker color right in here, that's a stream hidden by trees. If, you know, it actually goes down, we have gone down, I would say you could stand in it, and sometimes it'd only be ankle deep. It's loaded with rocks, but it does flow, but what it goes into is a huge concrete thing just before our fence line in front of Unit 1.
Is it on Plan 7? Can we, because I'm seeing something like what you might be describing on Plan 7.
It's this dark area right in here. You'll see our cars are parked there. This is our rotary. These houses here are up on a hill like, and they know themselves because these folks have got to deal with quite a pitch. And down in here, underneath these trees, is where it's
So it
flowing.
is on Plan 7.
Pardon?
It is on number 7, I'm looking at it.
Yeah. So
Some
it's
of the, he has to show
right
us.
in that area. So our concern was they talked about trying to do some kind of a culvert here, and they don't know where it's going to. Well, I would ask that you check to see, you're gonna be abusing some neighborhood stuff. That's all.
Yeah.
That-
Because once you start disturbing the ground in that area, I'm very concerned that it is gonna cause more problems. Because we, as I say, is on the west side. We're all on the west side, and that's our apartments. And they, all of those folks, I've helped bail out stuff ankle deep in the basements. So I know what happens, and it's not gonna just happen from storm water. I read your report about storm water. I know you did some stuff about the water table and things like that. But in taking into consideration your property, which you say is up on elevation, is gonna flow down toward the west side. So that's what we're concerned about, to make sure any piping they put in, that they are not gonna be abusing the properties next to them. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, I'm Anthony Rinaldi. I live at 785 East Street. And what she's talking about, this is my house right here. They're proposing to put a pipe to come up here, and instead of going through here, where it comes out to my property right here, that they want to put the pipe here, here, and back here, and here. Now, you're asking, you're saying they're gonna build a garage, so they're gonna raise the level of the property there. So that would be even with East Street. That means the water comes down here and it'll run off into our yard, because our yard goes down like this driveway. And farther down, the town put a pipe. There's a drainage with the pipe that goes into our property. Now, when this water on the high level flows in, this all backs up. I've been living here for 35 years, and it used to be a ditch, but it's all level now. So when the water comes, it backs up into my property to about here. My house is here, here. And it backs up to about here. And all the years during the fall, the leaves fall. So the ditch, or where the stream runs, is all even. So what she's talking about, the water comes into my property, and it goes into her property. And if they build a garage, that the water table would kind of, you push down, of course the water's gonna, the table will go out like that. So wouldn't that force the water into our property and more water into Paxon Road?
This is, I think, where we have requested the consultant to review the drainage issues, that this is something that we would ask them to address. I think it's related to the question I brought up also, if there's more, if that pipe runs off, because that's where that is gonna discharge.
Well, I just wanted to-
So I see there's a catch basin across, in front of your property on both sides of the street, and that discharges towards your property. Yeah. So, it's existing. It's not there, for this project to make your property better than it is now, but also not any worse. Okay, so, this is how,
It
what,
looks good on paper, but what happens.
so, okay, we hear what you're saying. Bring that up. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. We want to get the drainage report, which is supposed to be returned by around April 20th. What's our next meeting after that?
25th.
Is that time to review that? If we get it on the 20th?
Well, the
Okay,
idea
that's
was
3 days.
to get it in and then have the consultant come to the meeting on the 25th to go over his report with the commission.
Okay, and I think the consultant said that he would be here also to present his findings on the report?
Yeah, that's what I just said, the idea is for the consultant to come on the 25th to present his report.
Okay, so
Yeah.
he would be able to do that.
That's part of the proposal, yes.
Okay. So could continue this until April 25th. Do you have anything else on for that?
Didn't put it in the agenda, but
Next time, we have
we do have something.
I don't see anything
two
for
or
the,
three, no, we have like 3 on there already, or 2, we have 2 on there,
on the 25th?
for 7,
Okay,
7,
on this
15, so. 7.
Just, what if they continue? Don't stretch it out too
Actually,
much.
Well, no, because then there's Nichols, and Stevie's right, we have,
Yeah, that could get
we
continued.
have 4.
What are you asking?
I'm just saying, don't get us so that we've got 2 continued hearings at 7 and 7:15.
What do we got on for there? I don't see that.
Right, I don't think the hearings that we have already scheduled for April 20th weren't put on the agenda, so I think Amy was saying she thinks it's the 7 and 7:15.
Yep, we have Nichols.
So if we schedule this for 7:30, why don't we say 7:35, just in case?
7:35 would be good.
Okay,
I know nothing is beyond that.
Okay, so we'll.
So April
continue this
25th at
till
7:35.
April 25th at 7:35,
That works
Okay.
fine.
okay? Good. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, would
Yeah.
we be able to get a copy of the peer review report prior to that meeting?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It should come in on the 20th, so I'll make sure it's emailed right to you as well.
You wanna make a motion for that? Didn't
Yeah.
you?
Would you
Okay,
guys
so
make a
we
motion?
have, someone make that a motion?
I'll move that.
Second. Any further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. 500. Thank you.
Maybe like 5-0. Okay. Okay, thank you.
You want all this stuff?
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll give you one.
What do you got?
Thank you. Good night.
Night. Just see, this,
You might not be here.
But I think it's a continuation.
Oh, it's continued?
Well, it says continued, I thought it meant,
no, but it's, yeah.
he's not here.
No, he won't be here. I think it's someone on behalf of him for the 763.
Okay.
Are we ready?
Yeah, go.
Town of Walpole Amendment to Order of Conditions, Conservation Commission Public Hearing in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wetlands Protection Act. Town of Walpole Wetlands Protection Bylaw. Notice is hereby given 10 of John Glossop to request an amendment to the order of conditions issued for 763-765 Main Street. The construction of a smaller addition to allow space for a parking area and stalls below the addition. Plans on file in the Conservation Commission office. Public hearing on the above matter will be held in Walpole Town Hall, 135 School Street, February 14th, 2018, beginning 7 p.m. All interested persons are requested to be present. Time is now 8:15. And let's see, do we have this letter?
Right, so this is from the consultant, Karen Skinner Caponi, just addressing some of the concerns that the commission had last hearing, which I'm sure the applicant will explain when time
We've got a
comes.
letter from town engineer.
Yeah, you can read these first two from the town.
This is from the town engineer, dated March 26th. There's comments in here for planning board, and there's two comments that apply for conservation. The plan shows construction to take place within an old sewer easement for the main interceptor. The developer's engineer had previously indicated that it was to be abandoned. However, it is unclear whether that easement has ever been officially abandoned. It's recently been brought to the attention of this department that perhaps the DPW forces use this former sewer easement to access the former sewer line, which was converted to a storm drain. Developer's engineer should confirm this with the highway superintendent before finalizing a design which could block access. Okay, so representing the applicant,
Good evening, I'm Donald Seaberg with Gloucester Engineering.
go ahead. There you go. Okay.
Go over the pages.
For your first comment that you read as far as the town engineer, I went out there with John and we actually opened up the manholes out there and confirmed that there is water flowing through. We're not gonna be affecting that line. We will keep the path and that easement open. What's going on actually right now is that there's a drain line, actually it was an old sewer main that came through that they converted to a drain line that comes right through here, down to here, and then it comes back out to another manhole, and then it discharges to the brook that's over here. So, we want, John mentioned that we were notifying of what we were doing.
What sheet are you looking at?
What sheet is that?
Number 2?
Well, this is, sheet
3.
Where is that again?
And basically, there's a manhole that's right at the base of where the wall's gonna be, right here. And there's another manhole that's really right on the edge of the wetland, which flows down to there. And it flows up to another manhole here, past the site. And then to another manhole up here where the dam is, and the water's flowing through. Then it discharges into the brook. on the downstream side. So the actual path follows the line pretty much right through there.
And what's this?
The blue is erosion control.
Okay. So that, what was Maggie's concern?
So, Maggie's concern was that she wasn't sure if the abandoned sewer easement, well, was abandoned, that's one of her concerns, or if the pipe was used for stormwater conveyance, it was converted from sewer to stormwater conveyance, and if the parking lot here was going to impact that. So again, just to be up to date, so this is an amendment, so the commission approved the demolition of the building
Right.
back here and the building of the proposed addition.
Yeah.
The amendment came forward with putting a parking area here and under the proposed building. That's what the amendment is for, that we're hearing, the continued public hearing tonight. At the last public hearing, there was concerns with the area to the rear had been altered. More of the area had been cleared than approved under the original order of conditions. And we asked for them to come forward with a restoration plan for the riverfront area, which is one of the last plan sets that you'll see. Karen Catroni put together a replication or restoration plan for the riverfront area, and I had some inputs on the different planting scheme as well. This is. In addition, one of the concerns was if the abandoned, if the additional riverfront area that was being worked in by putting the parking lot, if that was considered redevelopment or if it was considered riverfront area. And Mr. Glosser presented information as well as they did some test pits out there to confirm that the right-of-way is a gravel, sandy right-of-way, and it lacks loam, so it would be defined as a redevelopment, previously developed riverfront area rather than a newly altered riverfront area. And then the commission was looking for some improvement to the riverfront area to the river, since this is a redevelopment project, and that improvement would be the stormwater management of the area as well as the restoration of the riverfront area.
Do you have anything else to add?
Oh, that's, I think I just did a quick job.
Thanks.
She had some comments, I believe we addressed them.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, we're not altering the path, so they have access to the path going through there. And it's a pretty substantial area that we're gonna dress up.
And one of my concerns that I did talk to John a bit about was, so the stormwater from the parking lot, the first flush will come through and go through a storm scepter and then infiltrate, and then be infiltrated. Anything beyond the 10-year storm, after the first flush, will go through a weir here and go into this riprap area. Which I thought was a little unusual, but he seemed to convince me that it was okay as long as the first flush went through the storm scepter.
So they still have access to this sewer line, and it's now a drain line.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Did you have anything else? Do you have anything else to add? Okay. Anything else?
Yeah.
No, just the retaining wall, you to be by a structural engineer. It says that you don't have any detail on that.
We do, we actually enhanced the detail, we have a full detail, the retaining wall, it's on sheet 2 of
Right, that was the other thing.
I don't have anything else.
Okay, Jim?
Nothing.
Roger?
I think it's great improvement on the planning. Oh, no. Okay.
Okay, Betsy?
No, no, no.
Al?
I think Karen answers the questions that we had and solve the problem for us.
Okay. Anyone in the audience, any questions or comments? Please identify yourself for the record. No, okay. Someone want to make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? In
So-
favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained?
So Jack, you
I
can't
will
vote.
abstain from the vote. So, what's the, accept the amendment?
Yep, this amendment,
Someone want to make a motion to accept the amendment as proposed?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Aye.
Further? Okay. Are you voting?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 4-0-1? Okay. I'm abstaining.
5.
Right, so it's 5-0-1.
Try 5-0-1. Okay. Okay, thank you.
not yet, one more to go.
Okay, we ready?
Ready?
Are we ready? Town of Walpole Conservation Commission request for determination of applicability. According to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, Wetlands Protection Act, Town of Walpole Wetlands Protection Bylaw, notice is hereby given the intent of super sale and service. Determine if the removal of the current cesspool soil and installation of a concrete tank at 1900 Main Street, Walpole, falls under the jurisdiction of the Town of Walpole Wetlands Protection Act, the Town of Walpole Wetlands Bylaw. Plans are on file with Conservation Commission office. Conservation Commission meeting will be held in Walpole Town Hall, 135 School Street, March 28, 2018, at 7:45 PM. All interested persons request to be present. Time is now at 8:30. And, okay, we have some outstanding property taxes. This is from the town engineer. Recommended that erosion controls to be used should be discussed, as there are none shown on the plans and there are no contour lines shown on the plans to be able to judge which way surface flow is. Statement on the plan regarding the presence of an LSP to be considered as a condition. Okay. Board of Health, it's March 6th meeting. Voted unanimously that they have no concerns regarding the request for determination application for 1900 Main Street. Let's see, Board of Health at its March 6th meeting. When was this one? March 7th. Voted unanimously that they are strongly opposed to allowing any additional projects and/or services at 1900 Main Street until owners of the establishment demonstrate continued compliance with the property. Okay. So, representing the applicant,
Hi, I'm Melissa Young from Supa Sales and Service.
and do you want to tell us what you are planning to do here?
Describe what you're
What you,
doing.
So I apologize. Within the recent month, the design engineer for the septic design, there appears to be, have been some communication issues between us. We had asked him to do a scope of work beyond the septic, and there was a general lack of follow-through. So in my communication with him, saying that we were no longer going to need him moving forward, meaning with the other scope of what we were asking him to do, he took that to mean that we didn't need his services whatsoever. And now he feels that further representing us here is a conflict of interest, because he feels that I've said that I don't need his work. I'm currently in the process of, I've discussed with the Board of Health, because as part of the notes within this plan is that the site engineer should be present during the installation. The Board of Health has agreed that any site engineer, any engineer can be present, and I am currently in communication with someone that will be present during the installation. This is, from my understanding, a relatively straightforward procedure. There will be an installation of a tight tank. So the only area that will be disturbed is the current, I guess it's a cesspool area. So that area will be dug out, removed, and the engineer that will be on site will inspect to the depth. It's on the plan here, I believe it's, the specification of the depth is on the plans. To be sure that there's a compacted gravel surface. We have a tight tank, which is essentially a sealed concrete box that will be lowered into that spot. There's the design engineer or the engineer that will be present during installation. There'll be a couple of processes, including making sure that that tank is tight, making sure that there's no leaks prior to covering it over. We do have a pumping contract with BIG Septic, which is a local septic service. There's several alarms in place that if the tank gets to a certain capacity, there will be alarms that will go off to make us aware of that if should the tank reach a certain capacity. I believe it's 60% prior to our standard monthly, or I think it's every other month, pumping. And we were happy to be moving forward with this. This has been a long time coming. So we're trying to make sure that all the proper channels are in place. I know that there was some discussion that there was no erosion control in sight. The area that is being removed was already dug as a test site. So there is partially an area there. It's already been removed by during the test digging, and it just has to go down a little further. Like I said, the existing cesspool will be removed, and this concrete tank shall be inserted.
Okay. Landis?
So this is a request for determination of applicability, and this is just how we have decided to handle installation of septic systems, because we understand they're a benefit to the wetlands. This is replacing a failed cesspool, so it'll be very much of an improvement. What we need to look at is just during construction how it's handled and it doesn't impact the wetlands. So I agree that there should be some erosion control placed on the site between the wetlands and the proposed activity, just to provide erosion sedimentation control during the project. That doesn't have to be a lot, it can just be kind of ringing the area of work, and I imagine there's going to be some excavation of materials, and just so that it doesn't migrate towards the wetlands. In addition, my other concern would just be if there's any dewatering, so that the contractor needs to know that if there's dewatering, it has to go into a settling basin, or depending on how muddy the water is, sometimes just a silt sack at the end of the pipe is enough, and being discharged away from the wetlands. So I think those should be conditions of the request. As well as an LSP. It's my understanding that LSP is supposed to be on site during excavation, so that I agree that should be a condition. In addition to that, that's it. It's a positive, it's an improvement.
Okay. Media? Jim?
Nothing.
Roger?
I think that's a good idea to get that replaced.
Hey, Betsy?
No comment, thanks.
Al?
No problem.
Okay. Do we have, we've been issuing back taxes? You're aware?
I am. It's currently being worked out. That's also a long time issue that's being taken care of.
Right, so we can make sure that's being worked on. I know the applicant is in an agreement with the Board of Selectmen to do several things within a certain deadline, so, and putting the tank in is one of those things, so I'm sure we don't want to hold them up.
Do you have a time frame?
We were waiting on approval tonight. The tank has been ordered and my understanding is ready to ship to us when we are ready to say go ahead. The hope is to now get an LSP. I'll have to contact an LSP to get on board, and like I said, I have another septic design engineer that's on board to be there during installation. So I just apparently have a couple more details to work out, and we're very close to being able to get this installed.
Okay.
I believe our deadline with the Board of Selectmen is before the beginning of May 1st to be exact. So my intention is to have it done before May 1st.
Okay, so you're gonna move ahead.
We're moving
Okay.
as quickly as we're able to.
Do we have any other outstanding issues with the signs or the fence or whatever?
Well, I think that the owners are also aware that the fence and the signs, we have a May 1st deadline on that as well, so.
Yes.
Okay, so you're working on that?
Yes,
To
we are.
conclude all this
There's a
by
lot
May
of moving
1st?
parts, a lot of, a lot of different boards are involved right now, and we're very pleased that we're making continued progress. It's a very tight web, so one thing has to happen for the next thing to happen, for the next thing to happen. I anticipate actually coming back before you within the next several weeks as well, because I'm currently going in front of the zoning board, and then once they make a determination, we'll be back here as well. So we can continue to discuss the property moving forward. Things are looking very good, and hopefully this will be a giant check mark checked off that we can then proceed with some of the other loose ends that need to be taken care of, including the
Okay.
fence and the signage. I have the signage. I'm waiting on installing the fence for good weather.
Okay. You're recommending -3?
Yes, I recommend you close the hearing and issue a -3 with conditions for erosion control, dewatering, and the LSB.
Okay, someone make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. 600. And a -3 with conditions. Someone want to move that?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. 600. Good. Thank you. Okay.
We'll get there eventually. But good luck to them trying to put that tank in now. It'll float.
Good luck, I can't see it.
That could be a problem if they get some, and then they pump it out. It's empty, there's no weight holding it down.
Yeah, that's what I said, it'll float.
Yeah. Okay.
So next on the agenda is a request for a minor modification to DEP 315-1120 Union Village Burns Ave to remediate soil in compliance with the MPC. Do you have copies of this?
He has.
Yeah.
Oh, just,
Did you make copies?
yeah, the
Then there should be copies in your folder of the Lightship Engineering.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Petrozzi is going to explain things.
Good evening, Lou Petrozzi for Wall Street Development Corp. Apologize for coming tonight again, but I was notified middle of last week that some of the soil tests that we had been conducting on the property exposed us 2 areas that require soil removal. Area 1, in this location, is approximately a 10 by 10 foot square area. Contains about 22 tons of material, or calculated at 22 tons. That is equivalent to roughly 16 cubic yards of material potentially that could be removed. Does not account for boulders or rocks or anything, or metal debris or anything else that might be in that area. And then there's a second area further into the site. As you look at it, test pit 9. That area is roughly 13 feet by about 25 feet. And they've estimated a maximum of 105 tons of material potentially, which translates into approximately 70 cubic yards of material that must be removed. What we're asking to do is to, it's kind of a 3 or 4 step process to remove. First you prepare the site with some coverage, polyethylene plastic that goes on the ground. You excavate the material, put it on the plastic, cover the plastic up, cover the material up. You do additional testing on the sides of the excavation, and you retest that to make sure you've gotten everything that is required to be removed. And then that material is then hauled off-site. One location is in Massachusetts, another location, it's 2 different types of material. One gets hauled to a site in Massachusetts, and one, I believe, gets hauled to a location in Maine. So, as it relates to the site, if the commission may recall, both locations are outside the 25-foot no disturb zone, but as you may recall, during the hearing process, that as part of the order, we've committed ourselves to going in there and cleaning out the debris and then restoring the 25-foot buffer. These two areas are outside that, the 25-foot buffer, so we're not extending any further excavation to that area. We're just simply going to remove the soils from those two locations, and then the excavated holes will be filled with clean sandy gravel material that will, in terms of the process, once the holes are, we could conceivably go in there, and what they've told me is they divide the excavation off, and you put your clean material in the excavated hole so we don't leave the hole open any longer than 24-hour period. And then if there's further excavation that requires additional soils to remove, they pull the plastic back and they can excavate right from the limit from where they were. But unfortunately, we're required to do this work, and it's a time-sensitive issue. And since we have now a good weather pattern coming, and we'd like to try and take advantage of that and perform the actual excavation tomorrow, have additional soil tests, analytical data done, so it takes 48 hours, and be back on the site to clean everything up Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. And we'll be completely done with the process. And that's really all that's involved.
Okay. Landis?
So as, Jack, you weren't here, but at the last meeting, Ms. Petrosi came forward with a request for minor modification to do some, what he called cleaning up of the site, do some picking up of branches and fallen trees and the man-made material and stuff that could be taken away without excavation and really changing the site a lot. The commission voted that that was a minor modification. And then after that, it came to light that there was some remediation that had to be done on site last week. And he indicated that it was time sensitive and he wanted to do it as soon as possible. So again, I said, well, you have to, because of a change of plan, you have to come before the Conservation Commission again. So the question is this work, can this be under the existing order of conditions as a minor modification, or should he be filing an amendment or a new notice of intent? That's the one question. And if it is simply can be done under the existing order of conditions, which is for a housing development, what kind of guidelines would the commission give in order for him to do this? As I think everyone knows, is the housing development was not permitted by the zoning board, so that's kind of, he can't at this point move forward with the project at hand because he doesn't have approval from the zoning board. At some point he may, but at this point he can't. So I think part of the concern was that not to go in and prep the site for a future project without having that permit from the zoning board, but to, since he does have an existing order of conditions, that the commission should give him guidelines of what he can do under that order. So that's my concerns is if he goes, if that's, for one, the excavation that you want to do is, it's not just those little squares that you put on the plan, is it?
Yeah, just those squares.
Just those squares. So that's the 18 by 25 feet
This area
scale,
here
to
is
scale.
roughly 10 by 10. Yeah, this is the scale, yeah.
Okay, all right, so
That's the limit of the excavation.
that's the exact work area that you're
And
requesting.
any material that's excavated out will be stockpiled on the upside of those locations.
Outside the buffer zone.
Well, not, I don't know if we'd be able to move it outside there was thought that we'd move it right to the road, but I didn't think that that was practical, so it would be still within the 100-foot buffer zone, but not.
In areas that already are disturbed
Correct,
from
areas that are
moving
disturbed,
around.
yes. I would point out that, you know, I was surprised by the whole thing, and I thought it was an exempt activity under the regulations. It turns out that you can go in there and do testing, excavation for testing all day long and be exempt, but it's the actual removal of the material that is not exempt. So it's kind of like, okay, you know, what's worse, the excavation or the removal of the material? So it's, so I came in to see Landis and told her that we were planning on doing this, and she told me that you have to come to the commission, and that's why I'm here tonight, to do that, because I thought it was an exempt activity based on the testing.
Okay. Emilio?
I
Thoughts,
don't have an
comments?
issue with it.
Jim?
So the issue is whether this is a minor modification or not, right?
The activity is minor modification in terms of what we're proposing to do for activity, yes.
And why do you claim it's a minor modification?
Well, because the order allows us to do a much greater volume of work in the buffer zone than what is contemplated here. So I'm not coming back to the commission to perform all of that work. So we're just looking to do these two minor locations to do that work. You follow that? Explain it right.
So the order allows for excavation?
Well, the order of conditions that was granted was for site improvements and detention areas and all of that other work that was within 100 foot of the wetlands. We're not proceeding with that, so that order is still in effect for the next 3 years. What we're attempting to do here is approach the commission and say this is one of the activities that was previously allowed, but only on a very minor scale.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of confused now. One of the activities that was allowed
Yes.
is excavation.
Well, yeah, the commission allowed this whole area to be excavated out and cleaned out with all the debris and materials that's there. In fact, it was a specific condition of the order.
But did it allow for excavate? How deep are you going to excavate?
These are just going 4 feet, 4 feet, just to where the existing fill material has been observed, not into the virgin ground that was. So if you can imagine that when people dumped this material there, they dumped it on the existing ground and just bulldozed it over. All we're taking out is the area that is between what was previously the existing ground and the fill material. It's roughly, this is a 10 by 10 area, approximately 3 feet deep. This area down on the second area is approximately, they say, between 4.5 feet deep, and that's really it.
Why is this time sensitive?
We're under certain regulations with I'm not fully versed in all of the requirements, but I think under the, what do they call it?
Mass contingency plan or
Contingency plan
MCP.
is a requirement for us to have it out of there, I don't know, within a certain period of time.
What happens if you don't have it out there within a certain period of time?
Well, then DEP comes in and tells you to move it out. So either way, it has to be moved out.
My understanding is it's relatively low-level material that's a
Oh.
non-reporting, so you don't
Right.
have an
not
action
hazardous.
plan that's been filed with DEP.
Right.
so
Doesn't require a contingency plan to be filed with DEP.
If
And
you get it out immediately, is that?
Pretty much. I mean, I think that's the essence of it. Essentially, it's
haven't filed with
soils
DEP.
that, excuse
You,
me?
you don't have a plan, and
No, we don't,
with,
we're not
they don't have
required
a
to file
plan
a
yet
plan.
with DEP. it's low-grade material that they don't have to yet.
All right, I don't have anything else.
Would you repeat again, you said how many, what it weighs, how many yards? Each
The
site?
the conversion rate is 1.5 yards to every ton. So this area here is, they've estimated 22 tons, which equates to about 16 yards of material.
Okay,
This location, they've estimated 105 tons, which equates to about 70 yards of material. And in terms of truck, if you, an average 10-wheeler dump truck takes between 18 and 20 yards of material per load. So we're really talking, you know, 3 or 4
so you're
loads
doing
of
one
material.
truckload out of the one site?
Yeah, and then
small
but
site.
maybe 3.
Three.
It is a kind of a process because the site isn't conducive to bringing a truck, a loading truck inside the site. So this material, when it's ready to be moved, will have to be moved with a piece of equipment, a loader, and moved to the end of Burn, you know, where they can load the truck from Burns Ave. And because the vehicle, I don't know if they're sending 3 vehicles at one time from Maine, or whether or not that guy is gonna, I hope he's not gonna go back and forth by himself, but I think.
I'm
they'll
just
be
trying to
sending
get some
3 trucks.
idea of what we're looking at for volume. You got one truckload on the one site and probably 3
3 to 4
truckloads on the
truckloads,
other.
and, you know,
the other.
let's contemplate that maybe there
Yeah.
might be a few
Small
extra
issue.
yards that, you know, if we have to excavate a little bit, over dig.
Yeah, it depends what, you have to do this to determine whether you need to do more.
Correct.
Okay. Roger?
Well, it's an interesting question. They don't have any, DEP hasn't put any mandates, you know, they haven't called it a hazardous material site yet.
No, there's no need to because of the type of material that's there and the volume of the material that's there. It's
Well,
just
the
not
volume,
required under the
volume material as we know now. And we just hope there's no more.
Well, I can only say that this site has been tested and the soils chemically analyzed. I don't know, over 100 different samples have been taken on this property so far. In fact, these 2 locations, you can see the testing, that's the analyticals, that there was at least 4 samples taken from each of those red dots, those are test holes, at 2 foot, 4 foot, and all the way down to the virgin ground to determine the extent of what was there. And this is what this is revealed, this limited amount of material. And it was also tested to make sure there was no hazardous material like asbestos or any of that material that would be present. And so from our standpoint, I think those results are very, we're optimistic about everything that's there, so.
Well,
Anything else, Roger?
I'm just looking at the list here, table 1, table 2 on the extract here. I don't know myself how those were be classified. But I think someone else is gonna make that decision whether or not it fits into, how it fits into whether or not it type of operation that you need to do here as far as the rules are concerned.
The only thing I can say on behalf, these LSPs are under strict, very strict requirements and regulations, and believe me, they've taken and analyzed this data. I mean, the tests were done 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they're, you know, just getting total analytical returns back. So they're not going to do any favors for anybody. They're going to follow the rules.
It seems like this should be cleaned up, definitely, because it's a little ticking time bomb as the rules change and
Yeah.
time periods go on.
Well, as we move it into different phases of this potential development, we may be back to the commission if the commission wants us to clean the rest of the site up, and we'll do it at that time. But ideally, it would be best to do it when we're combining it with infrastructure construction and that sort of thing. So
Well, if I remember correctly, there are different classifications depending whether or not there would be children there or just adults.
No, well, I don't think that plays any role in this because the levels are the levels. Doesn't matter who's walking or
That's the
talking.
levels today.
Right, well, they're pretty strict, I mean.
Anything else, Roger? Betsy?
Okay, I think I'm puzzled for a totally different reason than you, Jack, and Jim are puzzled. We, and also the abutters too, I think, asked for all sorts of test pits to be put in on this property to look for hazardous materials that everyone hypothesized were likely to be there, given that the place has been a sort of an industrial dump site for quite a while. So, okay, 2 of them have come up positive with, looks like people were dumping oils or something and then dumping the, residues from something agricultural. I'm puzzled why we're not just saying, get it out of there. It's like right up against the wetlands, and I don't care what the DEP says. I mean, let's not wait around
I don't
for
understand your question.
Well, I guess it's like, I'm in favor of removing the materials that we asked you to test. We said test it, and then what did we do? Like, oh, you found some materials?
No, here's the way it transpired. We tested the site.
Yeah, which we asked you to do.
We did, and we went back, and as I've said during the hearing process, we would go back and follow whatever the regulations called for us to do. We went back in, and there were 2 spots that required further exploration.
Yeah.
These are the 2 spots. That's, this has been like a 2-3-stage process. It hasn't all happened at one time.
So I'm in favor of it, because as a conservation commissioner concerned about the wetlands that are just a few feet away from there, if we told you to go and look to see if you've got wastes on your property and you find them, the next step is to remove them.
Right.
That's why I'm puzzled why, Jim, you seem to be.
I don't think the question is if we're in favor of them removing or not, but just that if it falls under the existing order of conditions as a minor modification, that it can be done under that. Because it's a change of plan, and our order of conditions says whenever there's a change of plan, you have to come back to the commission and tell them what the change of plan is.
It seems like a logical extension of, if you're digging test pits and you find something bad, the logical, so I think it's a minor modification.
Al? In all the discussions we had, we expected the site to be cleaned up. The process for doing that is you get an LSP who directs you to clean up whatever he finds. And that's his job in this state. This is the system that DEP has set up. I have no problem with him going ahead, because our order of conditions expects the site to be cleaned up in the process. So I call it a minor modification.
I would think that it's a good idea to get rid of this stuff, and the sooner the better. I don't see anything gained by leaving it. I would think that our order of conditions would have had something in there that says that the site has to be cleaned up, right? Isn't there some?
Right, the only difference is that there was a lot of requirements under the order of conditions for this area to remove this stuff, to replant, to put some nice plantings in, and it was all in conjunction with the development. So now the development is not happening. So the difference is just to allow this to occur and then stabilize it with erosion control, and that's it. So that's
To me,
that's
I
why
would
we're
think
here.
there would
I
be
mean, I
something
agree.
in
It
our
needs to
order
be
of
done. I just
conditions
thought
that
just
would cover
information.
it. So I don't, if we need to consider it, come up with a name for it as a minor modification, but I don't think it's necessary to have another hearing on this
I agree.
with a major amendment. So, all right, anyone in the audience have any questions or comments, please identify yourself for the record.
Can I speak, because I have quite a few questions?
Yeah, use the microphone, please.
Okay, my name's Liz Barrows. So I have to apologize a little bit. I did get a copy of the report that was submitted, but the table, the chart of what was found, it was kind of illegible. So I'm not going to entirely know what was found and what was not found. But I have a series of questions. I spent a lot of time over the last 24 hours talking to experts who handle this stuff. One of the people in particular was with the local office of the Mass EPA. And as it seems some of you do not know, there are three, when something like this happens, there's three classifications. A minor modification, which is typos, things like that. Amendments, which are less significant changes. We need to determine whether the requested change is great enough to warrant the filing of a new notice of intent. That would be the third. If it's less serious, then you can consider an amendment. And an amendment would require a notice being placed in town paper, and a notice of intent would then be, abutters have to be notified. So that's one of my first concerns, is that this most certainly is not a minor modification. The reason why I say that is, as you know, we all of the abutters had many concerns about what was back there. And that's where I'm kind of handicapped here. I don't know what was back there because I couldn't read the report in advance of this meeting, or the table that had the chemicals or the compounds, the volatile organic compounds. That's basically the only words that I could get. So I lost track of what I was saying, but anyhow.
All right, but what is your question?
So my first issue is that, so when this whole original notice of intent came before your commission, we raised concerns about what was back there. He supposedly hired CMG. They had tested the soil, and he stated there were no hazardous materials that exceeded some thresholds for reporting, RC or whatever it's called. So we all trusted him that there were tests done of a certain battery of tests of chemicals and whatnot. That I made that naive assumption that was done. In hindsight, talking to experts who do this, it was really just a preliminary real estate transaction inspection of the soils. And if they didn't see anything visually or smell it, they weren't testing for it. So you supplied an order of conditions based upon the fact that there was nothing hazardous back there. So now that we know that there is something hazardous back there, not knowing what the materials are, let's say it's stuff like tar or things that might have been in roofing shingles, and certain I don't know I don't know what the chemicals would be. That's not my area of expertise. But one would think, well, if the land was owned by a subsidiary of the Bird Company who manufactured these products, who are known to have created products that had asbestos in them, then it would be a logical connection of the dots that possibly there might be stuff in other test pits that would have more serious implications to the health, like asbestos. So, yes, it is, in my opinion, way more than a minor modification.
Wait, you don't have any evidence to that effect.
No, but, so this is why I think it's not such a easy, like, let's go have, so that's the only first
You're
part
just
of it.
engaging in speculation here.
No, it's.
Wait a minute, the DEP has approved this, so you're telling me the DEP is wrong?
They haven't approved anything.
Has the DEP,
So-
isn't the DEP ordered you to do this?
No, he hasn't, according,
No, it's not recorded yet.
it's not.
No, these are the regulations
Right, we gotta
that are
comply
required
with-
to be followed
Right.
under the mass
Contingency plan, right.
Okay, there is, once again, we have misinformation that's being spouted about. So I don't wanna get into the semantics of it, but this site has been tested, has been analyzed, soil tests have been conducted, and these are the two spots that have come back after numerous soil samples and analytical data. These are the two locations where the soils have become necessary to be removed. I can't continue to have people spout out about information they have no knowledge about.
Okay, you go back, all right, but what is your question? You haven't asked a question yet.
So my, one of my questions is, in the report that he said that, I have not submitted anything to Mass DEP, did you say that?
I don't submit things to DEP.
What is your
LSP
question?
is
Did
responsible for it.
So Light Chip Engineering submitted a report to the
No,
Mass
They
DEP?
follow the regulations that they're
And you
allowed
said
to
that
follow.
nothing was above the reportable concentrations.
I'm not getting into this.
Did,
All right, what is your question? Please.
Landis, did I mishear when the applicant was up here stating that nothing exceeded the reportable concentration?
All I can say is, as far as the Wetlands Protection Act, as long as someone is complying with the MCP, that they're complying with our regulations. This board is not regulating different chemicals. What we're regulating is the work in the buffer zone and in the resource areas. So that's what we can address. The other regulations having to do with cleaning up hazardous waste is not in our purview. It's not what this board does. So as long as he's complying with those regulations, he's complying with us. And the way that I'm looking at it is the Conservation Commission issued an order of conditions that included work in that area, it included excavating that area, it included improvements to the area. It included having an LSP on site to make sure that they didn't come across anything during excavation that they had to comply with. And what is being presented tonight is that they found something, they're trying to clean it up. Can they do it in the buffer zone, under the existing order of conditions? I think several commissioners have said this is a good thing, we needed to clean up all along. We've asked for him to look for things to clean it up, and that's what he's trying to do. So I think that's what we're trying to concentrate on. If there's more stuff out there that he needs to clean up, that's Mass DEP, that's not the Conservation Commission.
Okay, so your question, you have a question? I still haven't heard a question.
I thought that was a question.
So I think your question is the report or the levels of what's out there, and that's just not
Landis, maybe
our.
you can explain to me that their statement is,
If their LSB is saying they're complying with the mass contingency regulations, we have to go by that, because that's the professional who knows those regulations.
Is the LSP gonna be on site
Yes.
for the whole duration?
They're certified to comply with mass contingency
Okay,
law.
so it said that
They're
this
licensed.
stuff would be left on site for 48 hours while they do outside
No.
testing in a certified lab.
Right. What happens is we do the initial excavation and we stockpile the material under impermeable cover. Then we do additional testing on the banks of the excavation to make sure that there is no further material that needs to be removed. The soil, the analytical part of that, once it gets to the lab, is approximately a 48-hour process. If they come back to us and say 48 hours later that, okay, you got everything, then we remove that material off-site, as I've told you. If there's more material that needs to be removed as a result of those tests, then we will go in there and do an additional limit of excavation and put that with the other material and do another round of testing until we have a clean bill of health on the excavation, the limit of excavation. And it could take a week's time for that to happen. But in the meantime, it's not in our best interest to leave the excavated holes excavated. We will be bringing in some clean material, sandy fill, that will be filling those holes, but we will keep a barrier to limit the line of excavation so that we know where we left off. And that's how it works. There's no, this is, like I said, it's a very strict process. The LSPs are under strict regulations to follow, and that's what we're trying to do. We're following the regulations. And I don't really know what the question would be as to why we shouldn't be allowed to do this.
Okay.
Can
Do you
I
have,
ask him one question?
what's your question? Address it here, please.
I'd like to know if he said, someone had asked the question, what is the, why would we want to do this expediently? What's the rush? Is there a guidelines for Mass DEP for getting it done? And I'd like to know.
The rushing getting it done is when you see a problem, you try to fix the problem as soon as you can. So in this particular case, it's a time-sensitive issue that would allow us to remove the material and not get into a process that might take months and months down the road for it to be resolved.
I would think it makes sense to complete this as quickly as you can once you start it. You don't want that material just sitting around in a pile. You want to get rid of it.
So, last question. The Mass DEP will not be notified that this information, these chemicals were found?
There is a report that the LSP prepares and submits. To whom, I don't know, but there is a report that goes with this process in accordance with the regulations that are in the MCP.
Okay. Anything else?
I spoke with Mark Barstow. You probably know who he is. And he explained quite a different process to me. So that's...
I'm aware of the process for amendment and DEP policy and minor modifications, and so I would be happy to give him a call and explain why we're considering this. In our conditions, we say if there's a change of plan, you have to come back and tell us what the change of plan is. So if they have a problem with it, then
no,
they would say that they have a
just
problem.
his understanding of how MCPs work.
Oh.
You know how it's two different branches essentially of the Mass DEP, and the only reason that the Mass EPA would have purview on a CMP or MCP is because if it was actually in a protected resource area. Otherwise, these MCPs are not. They're the ones that take care of it. It would have nothing to do with his actual department. So.
I don't quite follow what you're saying, but I can have a conversation with him, and if there's something further that the commission should be following, then certainly we will.
Thank you.
Yes, Conroy.
Sorry, a little late. I've read up on some of this stuff. One of the things that it's unfortunate that I would think on something like this, you'd need his engineer here explaining, but when you have a lay person explaining, it's what we've seen before. Question I have to you, and I understand where you guys are coming from, and the people here may not necessarily, and you can understand a little bit of frustration, but when you gave the order of conditions, you didn't know what was in the soil, did you? You didn't.
No.
So wouldn't that change your order? If you thought it was crappy stuff, we'll say junk, but now we know it's oily, shouldn't it be changed? I mean, a hay bale isn't gonna stop water running right through that into the thing. Wouldn't you be changing how you protect the wetlands? Wouldn't that be, that's my question.
From what's there now?
Yeah, I mean, if he's digging it up and you get rain or whatever, it's gonna wash through. A hay bale ain't gonna stop nothing. But doesn't your order conditions, don't you have stricter, or like you have to have poly or some type of stuff like that?
Yes, it's supposed to be, it's covered on the
Order
bottom and the top.
But what you guys gave for an order conditions, you were presented with, it's like this, but now you know it's that. Shouldn't that be a
We
whole?
anticipated that there could be material like this in there. This is, I think,
Well,
without, I believe our order of conditions address that if there was not suitable material for, not suitable fill in there, that it would be removed.
But the LSP is there to make sure that this stuff doesn't migrate outside of the excavated area. There's gonna be somebody there, a licensed site professional, to protect that.
I understand that. I have done this before. It's kind of what, part of my business I've done. But the fact is that you didn't know what the chemical analysis was, so we don't even know what you guys have protection and what you approved is gonna stop this. I mean, we all know that some chemicals react different with poly, react different with hay bales. So that's where I'm driving at. And the other thing that was in his report by his CMG or whatever it was, is they said if there's stuff found, they're gonna put a fence around it. Now, was that part of everything you guys approved? They're supposed to fence it in, just like any other site you see, gas stations, everything. Everybody fences those in, so you can't get in there. Now that we know that it's hazardous, if it's just crap, sorry, but, you know, you just dig it out, no one really cares because no one's gonna get hurt. But now you're trying to keep people away from it, just like a gas station.
Is there something about fencing here?
No, on the report originally that he had done with everybody else, the CMG, his engineer said, yeah, we'll have to fence it in if there's issues.
Yeah, they have to comply with the law. That's what's wrong with that?
But I understand they have to comply with the law. My whole point here is very simple. Now you're going beyond what you guys thought it was. Is there anything all right, let me back up. It should have been, if the order conditions is if it's this, we do that. If it's this, we do that. If it's this, we do that. And
we can't deal with every possible thing that could happen on the site. That's why he's come back here.
Yeah, okay.
Right,
But
let me ask
is
you
there
a
anything for fence on this plan that he's doing?
Right now, he hasn't asked to put up a fence.
Because his material is hazardous, and per DEP, he has to do that.
That's right. If he has to comply with the law, we're not gonna tell him not to comply with the law.
I understand, but you people are the conservation. DEP can't overrule you, so if they're gonna stick a fence in, shouldn't that be on your plan of order conditions?
What do you mean DEP can't overrule us on hazardous waste? They can't
No, as far as where you're putting the fence and how it's lining up.
What would you?
No, okay, very simple. I see, we have a situation where we were told the stuff is no problem. Now we have a test where he told the zoning board he couldn't do it, and now we know it's crap, and now he wants to go in and dig, and we're going based upon something where we said it wasn't too bad before. That's where I'm coming from.
That's why you do these tests. When they figured out that there was more of a problem there, and now he's complying with the law. I don't understand what the problem is.
But to do this as just an adjustment as opposed to a new hearing, I find that a little egregious.
Well, you can't point to the law and tell me where we're wrong.
Where you're wrong? Okay. Very simple. I don't deal with this, but I know that you have residents here, and they found hazardous, and now all of a sudden he's coming in on the back door, and he's gonna dig up all this crap that he said there was nothing wrong with it, and nobody's supposed to be upset about that? Come on.
Well, let me just back up a little bit. When this was filed, I think we had concerns about the material that was there. We did a site visit and what might be in there. and he has done some testing and shows that there is some
Understood,
material
Jack.
that needs to be removed. So he's got to comply, the way that is done is to comply with the rules that govern that. I'm concerned here that, you know, the material ought to be removed. Do you agree or disagree with that?
The material?
The bed, this bed, so these two spots.
Two spots, that's all we know about. Okay?
Well, he said it's been
Okay, let me ask you a question. I'll ask you a question to this board right now. Why wasn't these tests done when he started the whole process? This is very simple. We know how this goes. You show it the nice stuff, and then you come back later with the bad stuff, and we kind of sweep the
It's
pot.
up to the applicant to decide how he's gonna approach it. We covered that, I believe.
I beg to disagree, and you guys aren't gonna like
we
me for this,
believe-
but I would think that, I would be sitting up there a little mad that he's done these tests to show different than what he showed you before. I would've said, where were these tests 6 months ago? Please,
The way I,
stop.
the way I,
Please,
wait a
stop.
minute, wait a
Sit
minute,
down.
wait a minute.
I'm up.
Hey, hold it, both of you.
Could you tell him that?
You, just both of you, just
Did we have
Please.
estimates on
Hey.
this, on this, didn't we?
keep,
He did the testing.
just keep addressing
LSP,
this,
that's
the board,
LSP's
please,
job.
not each other.
Well, I get him in my ear, just giving me
Well,
minutes.
and both of you, just keep
Mr. Wiley, I'd ask
addressing
you if
here.
you'd ask him to sit down instead of being behind my ear, because that's rude.
All right, let's, I don't, to me, all right, our order of conditions covered this. We were concerned when we made the site visit what might be on the site. And our order of conditions said it needs to be addressed as you proceed. Now, whether he wanted to do it before and do this extensive testing, as an applicant, I can understand that why spend that money to do this now, because I may not be able to get approval of the plan that he proposed to do. So, to me, it makes sense, get the order of conditions, come back and complete this testing. I don't see, and I think that's his choice of when he wants to do it. He has done it, now we have two areas that that show that there is material there that needs to be removed. And now that it's there, whether the site goes through or not, I would say whoever owns that could be told, you gotta get that out of there, you gotta clean that up. So I don't understand the issue. If he follows the rules that are there in doing this, then what is, you know, I don't understand the issue.
Well, the rules in my, maybe I'm just a little simple-minded about this, but it was said it was this material, now it's that, and now you're trying to protect the wetlands, so now you know actually what it is. So what you said you approved before was gonna protect against anything, including these hazardous oily materials. Is that what you're saying?
Just
That
keep
will-
talking
we
in
did-
these vague statements, which you keep saying that we approve one thing and now he's doing something different. That's
No,
not
what I
true.
said, what was presented before, I will say it very simply, it was this material. Now all of a sudden, we have an oily waste that has to leave. All I'm asking you people is, are you 100% confident what you approved in the order conditions before will protect the wetlands against this new material, chemical analysis that you approved before? That's all.
If he gets it out of there, it will.
No, I'm saying what the hay bales and whatever else you have to do to make sure it doesn't go into the brook. You're all confident.
That's why the LSP is there, that we explain that. The licensed site professional is there to make sure that doesn't happen. That's his job.
His job is working for you?
No. Yes, he's a
He's
licensed site
he's
professional.
certified by the state. He can't
I
put his
understand what
life.
an LSP is, believe me.
He's
Now,
licensed.
Well, no, you don't seem to because you're arguing about it.
I'm not arguing. All I'm saying is, what you built a wall to hold this back. Now you need something else. You got a different material. Is your wall safe? I know you're gonna shake your head and whatever, but this is what it's coming to.
Jack, if I could answer.
Now, well, before I go, let me ask you a question. Do you have an actual plan from the LSP in front of you? Did he submit one to show?
No.
I would have
The
thought that you would
LSP
have.
has to comply with the law. That's why.
Okay.
So, but you don't have anything to say what the LSP recommends right now, is that correct?
No, because I'm trusting the LSP. That's right.
So, is the LSP gonna actually go by what you guys have for your
No, he's gonna go by what the DEP regulations are, that's what the LSP.
So if he goes beyond what you've approved, how does that work?
We have a letter from.
Yes,
Beyond what?
Beyond where
Jim,
he is.
Hold it,
Give
everybody.
the date, that's
Hold
all.
it, hold it.
We do have recommendations from the LSP right here. That's what Lightship Engineering is, which I believe you have a copy.
Yep.
We do have the plan of the location of the area that's gonna be excavated. I would say if, after this excavation, if there's more material out there, then that's what's being approved is, should be, what the commission should approve, is the excavation of these small areas. If it's gonna be expanded, then he probably should file a notice of intent simply for removal of the material, which is a limited project, he can do it. And if the material that's on site, based on these observations, if it changes how the stormwater management should be controlled, or any of the other components that protects the wetlands or applies to the regulations, then he will have to come back again. Any plan change, he needs to come back again. So I don't think it should be an open-ended, do these small areas and then he can excavate the whole site, or it's gonna change his design because of the material that's out there. He has to come back again.
So what you're telling me, Landis, is he's only gonna do those 2 spots and that's it, that's all he can
I
do?
think that's what the commission should agree upon.
So we're, okay,
And
I'll back up.
if the
We're only doing
mediation
those 2 spots?
expands, then.
That's all he's asked us to do.
Okay,
That's all that's before us.
okay, that's, I wanted, fine.
If
I'm
the
sorry that-
mediation expands, then the commission should consider a filing specifically for remediation, which we have had
how-
Walpole lots of times.
Okay, now, will the LSP just stop, or will they, if they find more, keep, what, will they just have to come back, or they just say you're done
Okay,
for the day?
they have reviewed that area with their, whatever procedure they use, and found that these are the areas. There is potential that it may exceed that for some amount, which they are proposing, suggesting, if they do, they find that the edges, after it's excavated, that they would take out a little more until they find the end of that. Now, if this turns out, and we can put this in some percentage that is reasonable, you know, if you find if you gotta go another 6 inches to get the last, there's no point in stopping at that point. That's worse, leaving it exposed. You wanna finish it and get it out of there. If he finds it's going 6 feet or 10 feet, but they've already checked around there and have come up with a border area, so they've done testing that suggests that this is where we should do it. But we're gonna check and make sure that we've got, when we get to the edges, that we haven't missed something.
Okay, I know it's
All right.
beyond your purview, but I'll ask you, Lana, since you seem to know, this has all been submitted to the state, I assume, and they're all happy and all that?
The changes?
Yeah, not so much your changes, but all the material they've done and all the testing and all the little jars that they did.
I
You
don't know if it's
Okay.
been
All
submitted.
right.
My understanding is, I mean, Lou could answer to that, if it's been
Okay.
submitted or not.
You understand how it's been? Now I come back, I wish I asked you guys before, there's just gonna be those, fine. If you're comfortable with that, you're gonna understand where we're coming from, especially the people who live there. I have tenants there, and that's what it's about. The question is, and I know I sent it to Landis, has nothing to do with you, but once we hit the 150-yard mark, he's beyond into the special permit, but it has nothing to do with you. Landis, I know, understands that, and if you approve an extra 6 inches and you go over that, it's nothing to do with you, it's a special permit. It would have been nice, because I wouldn't have been able to charge on you if their engineer was here to explain it. Unfortunately, I think I would have brought him because it would have explained everything to you how I'm gonna do it. But I've been through this for over a year, and I've been chastised, and I'm gonna go on a little rampage here for being a layman, but I've only seen Mr. Petrozzi here. And if you had the LSP and he says, this is what's happening, I would have sat in my seat, that's all.
Well, we have the report that the LSP put together, and this was done, you know, it's.
Okay, but
all right.
we also had reports, Jack, as you understand, those test holes, and we said everything's not a problem, so that's just,
I think where those test holes were, that's what I don't think these spots are where that, I think those test holes, try to remember what was there was how deep the material was. This was part of the purpose of to get some idea of how much cover had been brought in over the years.
I'll have to look at mine, what I have for the test holes. There was one that I know was deep, but most around 4 foot level.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
That's all
Right.
right. To me, it makes, it just, if it's there, if I were a neighbor, I would be happy that that material is being removed and taken to a proper disposal area.
If you, but also, you'd also like to make sure when it leaves the site, it's all controlled.
This is what these people do. They're licensed to do this.
So
Now, I don't know if you recall, you know, I live in South Walpole, and when they cleaned up the Bird Machine, Bird Machine, those trucks were coming out of there, you know, forever, it seemed like at the time. I mean, they took, and they went to the proper place, they had different stuff that they had to dispose of, but they got it out of there. And, you know, so to me, it makes sense to do this and get it out of there. And I think we can, at this point, make sure that if there's anything beyond a minor addition to clean up an edge, that then he's gonna come back to us.
Okay.
But again, it makes sense to get that material out of, also from the wetland standpoint, from a neighborhood standpoint and from a wetland standpoint. Why have, I mean, it's there, it must be when groundwater, this stuff migrating through, potentially.
It's everywhere down East Walpole. It's been there forever and ever.
Yeah, you know, so let's to make sense to get rid of it.
I think the concern is, unfortunately, you guys are the one stop that we all know about, and the DEP and everything else. It would be nice to have a plan. I've worked on jobs. I worked on a Harvard job where, you know, everything, you know exactly what's happening. And that's what we have here. Everybody is not quite sure. I think you're taking a beating, all you guys, only because you're the only ones we can talk to. Okay? Just so you understand, I mean.
No, I think we do understand, because we're just citizens too. I mean, I could easily be on the other side of the table, and I sometimes am at a meeting. I just happen to be on this side because I volunteered. So I actually appreciate people being vigilant in town, whether it's near their property or not. And so we've got a heads up to be maybe a little extra vigilant going forward. So thanks. It's too bad it's so contentious, this particular thing.
If this wasn't a neighborhood and you're just going off Route 1, I don't think everybody happy to cover the truck. But it's going right down their neighborhood with their kids, and everybody's got to be concerned. That's all. That's, I think, the biggest concern, and that's why everybody's here tonight for that. So.
Okay. Thank you for your comments.
For the last part, not the first, right?
We like all your comments, just.
Yeah.
Just how you are answered. Go ahead. You have anything else, Jack? Thank you. Yes.
Cheryl Hayes, Montville 8 Brook Lane. So my property abuts the conservation lands and this property. So I know that one of the test pits that actually has to be excavated is somewhat close to my house. So I guess based on what Lou had just mentioned a little while ago, you know, he wants to kind of get in there and get out of there. So he was hoping to do this, I think he said like Thursday or Friday, to go in and start that process. But what I'm a little bit confused about is that I've heard everybody talking about like the LSP and what the plan is, but I'm just unclear, like, will you be able to do that? Will you be able to do that if we haven't had like the LSP plan? You know, because like he said, like I'd like to get in there and get that hazardous soil out, and you know, there's we have to put like the polyethylene top down, we have to put the soil on the top, then we have to cover the top. And I guess when I read the Lighthouse Engineering like report, it kind of identified what it was, but it didn't necessarily talk about like what the plan, like, you know, Lou has to do like the following thing. So does that just happen simultaneously as someone goes in to like remove the dirt because the LSP is on site?
I thought the plan indicated what they were gonna do.
Well, what I
The
got,
letter, the letter,
Lakeship Engineering, this one.
the letter, then it
I
didn't.
didn't really see like, you know, like, the polyethylene has to put down, like a hay bale has to be put up, or, you know, like fencing has to be around the area. Like, I didn't see kind of a, like, specified process that's followed.
Yeah, they're not gonna provide us that, because whatever they have to do will comply with the
They
regulations.
just do it, so they don't
Well, it's
actually.
not that they just do it, they have to comply with the regulations that
Okay.
DEP has promulgated for this type of work.
So then, Lou, is that what the LSP does? Cause spell it out for me.
The LSP is in charge of the complete operation. All we're providing is equipment to do the excavation and the trucking or loading of the material onto the vehicles that will truck the material away. We have no say in what's excavated. The LSP does all of that, and
Is there gonna be a fence?
no, because we're planning
You
on.
didn't describe any fence, but.
The fence that was originally contemplated by the CMG report contemplated an entire project being excavated at one time, and therefore the potential was that substantial volumes of material would need to be stockpiled, and therefore you may need to have some sort of barrier to keep people out and equipment protected and the whole project site protected. So what we're talking about right now is basically one pile that's 16 yards of material and another maybe 2 or 3 piles of 70 yards of material. We're not talking about huge volumes here. It's very minimal, so.
So like, say tomorrow, for instance, like, if they were to come on site, they're just gonna go, Lou, like, put this down, do this, do that, your guys
We
do it.
don't put that.
Oh,
They
okay.
do it.
Okay.
They do all of the
Okay.
preparation. We're gonna excavate the material out and put it where they tell us to put it.
Okay.
And then if we can make it all work, we're gonna bring in clean material that day so we don't leave the hole open.
So I don't fall into the hole.
So nobody who's out there for their daily walk falls into the hole.
I appreciate
So.
that.
Okay,
Okay, so that's like more my concern, and again, the fact that I really thought when I read this originally, I'm like, I'm gonna be looking at this for 3 months, like outside, you know, like my house. So at the end of the day, yes, like, I want them to be in there, I want them to be out of there. And we were just concerned, but because Lou seems to be doing it quickly, you know, any contaminants that would go into like the brook, because the brook's not that far away, or into the wetlands clearly. So if things were left out there for long periods of time, you know, what the risk of that was.
okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
What is, if this is,
You want to come up to the microphone?
historic fill, like the
Wait,
hazardous.
just start over again when you get there.
If this is for the hazardous material, it's historic fill. So they say that it goes by thresholds. If it was like a oil spill, it has to be taken care of within 48 hours, and they have all these different regulations. They told me it was 120 days from first finding out about it. Since it's been there for so long, why does this have to be taken care of tomorrow? Why can't it wait a week so that if we think that, you know, so that answers can be had?
So
We're
what
not
can
gonna
be
hold
done?
another hearing on this.
What?
We're not holding another hearing on this.
What-
There's
No,
no
well,
holding
can
questions
you
that
do
they
you
can
wanna-
answer.
grant the minor
What-
modification subject to,
What do you want to put it off?
what?
Why do you want
My
to
concern
delay it?
is that once the material is removed, it's disposed of, and that evidence or whatever is gone forever. So that's the first layer of it. And then
So what do you want to do? What do you want to
No,
preserve the evidence?
I would like clarification from the LSP as to what the procedure was, because I was educated.
You can hire your own LSP and go do that.
This is gone. Once it's gone tomorrow, it's going to be gone in less than 24 hours. All
So
the
what do you want to do?
materials.
Check the soil yourself?
No. I want someone. Yeah, I know. I'm just.
I don't understand your question. I don't.
What are you getting at?
What
That's
I'm
the
getting
point we're
at
trying to
is-
understand.
How I was educated was that the MCP had to be notified, had to be notified, and that they were the ones who worked with the LSP, and it's being inferred by the applicant that because the LSP is taking care of it, the DEP is not even finding out about this.
He has to report to the DEP.
The LSP?
Yes.
I know, but so they're reporting after the fact, whereas the MCP, what if they have specific guidelines? And I don't know. It's just what is a week going to?
What's
That's
the
my
point?
opinion.
What is the point of pushing this off for a week? What do you want done?
Just like clarification of the process, but that's fine, respectfully. So.
Joan Kosky, 29 Burns Ave. I just want to say that we, the neighbors, are very concerned. Hazardous waste, you guys may work with it all the time. I think some of you have been very rude to people that have stood up here today. You should be a little more patient.
No, you have to come here with, if you have here facts
I'm
that
sorry,
you want to
we
present
don't know
to us.
about hazardous materials. It's
Well,
not something
but
we
you-
read up about in high
Maybe
school.
it would be worth your while to take make that effort.
Take a class in it.
No. you
Oh,
can
I'll
a
do
little
that in the
bit.
next
Hold it,
24 hours you
hold
just
it.
gave
Jim,
them.
hold it.
I'm
You're
just
not
saying, we
recognized.
received material, we read the material, we have concerns. I just think it would be nice if you tried to answer our concerns and make us a little more relaxed, saying the LSP has to go to the DEP. It has to go through the state. Please don't worry about that.
What do you want us to do?
Oh, I don't want you to say, oh, Lou, go right ahead within
We're
the
not
next
telling Lou,
24
we're
hours.
telling, Lou is gonna, the LSP is in charge of this site. We don't have any control over the LSP.
I understand that. It would have been nice if you explained that to us a little nicer than shouting at people up there. That's all I'm saying. Now I know the LSP has to go to the state, the DEP, and if they have issues, then they'll get back to you guys. Probably not. Apparently you won't have anything to do with this now. The only thing you had to do with was that he had to come for you to get permission to cut his little downed branches back there and do his superficial testing the first time. And then he went back and he did more testing, and yes, there's hazardous waste. It has to be removed. And all we want to make sure is it's done the right way.
All right, this is what, again, for the.
That's all we want,
for-
just done the right way.
For more than the first time, this is what the LSP is there. He's on site and is supervising this activity.
That's what we don't want to
That's
know.
what they get paid for and do, and that's what they have their requirements to do. They're licensed in order to do this and oversee it so it's done properly.
That's
this
wonderful,
is-
but can you understand our concern
can
when he
understand
says
you,
he
yes.
wants to start it tomorrow? It just seems like it's been going on for years now with him, and now he says, I'd like to start the digging tomorrow, when we just got the results. It just,
Again,
it's-
my thought is that now that it's knowledgeable that that material is there, it makes sense to get rid of it.
right, and we just
So-
want to get rid of the
And this
right
is-
way, and God
That's what
help
this,
us,
that's
the
what the
LSP will be there.
LSP is there to do, to see that it's done properly and follow the proper procedure.
Perfect.
And so,
Thank
okay, anyone else? Okay.
Can I just ask one more question? Lou, do do you and your LSP, is it the understanding that it's gonna take a day to remove the material that you have presented to the commission tonight?
Well, it could take as soon as 3 days. Should excavate, take the soil tests, 48 hours to get the results. If the results come back that we've taken all the material out, then we can remove everything on that day.
So the areas that you have indicated on the plan, it could take up to 3 days to remove that material total. Because of the testing? So if it tests clean, you don't take it out, or?
No, what happens is that doing an excavation, you get to a limit of the excavation, and they know where the starting point is, but the end point, they want to make sure that they get that end point, and they have to take samples in order to make sure that they've gotten it all. So those, if it wasn't, if the lab could get us results quicker.
Could be a larger, if it's a larger excavated area than what you're showing on the plan, it could take more than 3 days.
No, well, what happens, these red locations here are the test holes that were done surrounding the middle, original test hole. So they know that it's not anything outside of those holes.
And, okay, all right,
So
so say
there's a
you
limit.
start it tomorrow, you start on Thursday, Friday, then you would go
Is
into
it
the
Monday?
weekend, you would go to Monday.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
why
I
we
think
don't
that
want
would
to
be
leave
the
the whole.
guidelines to do it Thursday, Friday, and then go back on Monday so that
Well,
I'm
it's
available
supposed
or
to be
anyone's
it's supposed to-
available.
It's supposed to rain on Friday, and so tomorrow would be a good
So
day.
you're talking right now of working just tomorrow?
Correct. Yeah, and then coming back as soon as they give us the results.
That would be acceptable.
You know, we don't want to leave the excavations
Right, obviously not, yeah.
open.
Yeah.
So we would try to get the material there
Right, I think
tomorrow.
maybe the neighbors and the whole, how much of the area you're gonna excavate, is it just this area, is it gonna be more, you know, the extent of the project? Maybe if the guidelines are do it tomorrow, Thursday, and then you go back
The
following work week when you have to remove more.
Excavate this material is probably going to take 2 hours, 3 hours, the most.
All right, well, that's what my question was.
And then, you know, the
testing.
Yeah, the material gets covered with the polyethylene and stabilized, and then they take their samples, they ship them off to the lab. We get our results in 48 hours.
Okay, I guess my point is if it becomes a larger area, then
Yeah, no,
it
it's-
has to, you have to come back and let
Yeah,
us
no,
know.
it's, I've been assured that it's, these
Not-
blocks that have been outlined by the LSP are the limit of the excavation.
Okay. Yes?
Good evening, Kathy Campbell, 35 Burns Ave. I just want to ask a clarifying question. I first heard that the excavation will be done, the materials will be covered, someone will come in and test the sides of that pit and the bottom of that pit to ensure that no more further cuts on the sides need to be made. And that's a 48-hour rush period according to the letter that we just received. If there's nothing else there, then the new fill gets brought in and filled, and then the hazardous materials get taken away. So that was one explanation I thought I heard, and the other explanation I thought I heard, and I apologize if I misunderstood it, I thought the other explanation that was given was we excavate the area, we cover the hazardous materials, we come in and we test, we immediately fill the hole so that there's no hazards to humans or animals or whatever walking around. So I'm a little bit unclear. Do the holes get filled immediately when you remove that stuff, or those holes remain open for the 48-hour period until the tests are done to confirm that no more cutting of the edges need to happen?
Let Mr. Petrosi explain how he plans to do this. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I thought he heard him say.
No.
So the holes, we don't want the holes to remain open so that people fall in them. It's not because of what's in the hole.
No, I understand.
So we would fill the holes in, but we would create another polyethylene barrier between the clean fill and the existing excavation, so that if they do find something in the tests, then they'll have a clear mark where to begin again. Okay, and that's really how, it's really a safety aspect to just making sure the hole gets, so that nobody falls in.
Okay, so thank you. And so the other question, and again, I don't know if I heard this correctly or not, but I heard Mr. Petrosi say that at some point he knew that there were 2 sites that had issues. So I guess I'm just, maybe it doesn't matter, but it matters to me in the sense that we've been doing this for 16 months. And at what point did we know that, or what point did he know that he had 2 sites that had issues? And is it a coincidence that one of the sites happens to be, you know, near the retention area? I just don't know at what point. I know the ZBA repeatedly asked for more testing and more information, which was not presented to them. He said there was a confidentiality issue. So I just don't know at what point, and maybe it doesn't matter, but again, with living with this for the last 16 months, it would be nice to know at what point he realized that there were 2 sites that had problems with him, and, you know, how did that sort of happen?
I think an interesting question. I don't know that it's pertinent to this discussion. If Mr. Petrosi wants to address it, he may. If he doesn't, that's...
Mr. Chairman, I'll just let you know, quite frankly, I just found out about it last week, and I immediately came in to see Landis and told her about it, that we needed to do it. We've been doing testing, continuous testing on the property to reaffirm results that were previously obtained by CMG, were retested by Lightship Engineering. So it's been a continuous process to make sure that what we found is reaffirmed. And unfortunately for me, they found, you know, Lightship Engineering felt that these were 2 areas that were across the threshold that we should address.
Okay,
Really
is that
quite
all right?
frank. That's
Okay,
simple.
thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Just for a point of clarification, Betsy, you had mentioned earlier, you know, you encouraged people to come here, and you knew this group had been like very I can't even speak. Vigilant, thank you. And we have. And I think what makes this contentious is because it's been a year / more. And we have tried to educate ourselves, trust me. And Landis has had a continual line of people through her office doors over the past year asking for documents, asking for understanding, explaining things to us so we could understand what these processes were. But Jim, the way Liz was treated tonight, belittled, demeaned, is unacceptable. And something should be done about that, because as residents, when we come here, and we don't have all the answers, and we come, and maybe our questions aren't articulated the best. But that, the way she was treated tonight, was unacceptable.
Our intent is not to upset anyone, either applicants or abutters or neighbors or anyone else who's interested in coming to our hearings. So we apologize if anybody's upset. I think, yeah, we'll leave it at that. But hopefully it's not our intent to upset the people in the audience. Mr. Conroy.
Very simple question. I assume this is all staked out, that everybody knows exactly where it's being dug and how big, so that if Landis goes and checks it, we know exactly what's being done? Is that? And Landis will be checking to make sure it's where they say? Is that?
I'll have to ask Mr. Petrosi, how is that identified on the site? Each of those 2 sites, how are they identified?
They're located with the flag.
Okay. Okay.
So they're presently not staked out, is what my,
The perimeter staked out? The perimeter is not staked out. It's I assume a center location with the plans to show which direction to go, how far.
and there is dimensions on that, correct?
We have dimensions on it, yes, from the center line of the roadway, access drive was
Makes
staked
sense
out.
to make that one of the conditions to have them stake out the area there.
I'm not asking about the center lines. When you go out there,
I think it would be,
3, 4 stakes, so that you know, oh, there it is. That's
I-
all, that's all I'm
I-
asking, to make
I
sure it
agree.
doesn't move.
I agree. I think it should be staked out so that.
So that when
the-
Landis comes down and she looks in, I'll say the same thing I said at the voting. I never said I was against it. I just like to do the process right, but I hope when she comes down, it's like, oh yeah, there they are. And if he gets it, great. But at least make sure, for all your sake, that it's staked out properly. We know it didn't move or grow or something to that.
No, we'll do that.
That's all I'm asking.
We'll do it.
And Landis you'll be down there?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so that's, you understand that area to be staked out?
we'll take
Each,
care of
each area to be excavated, the limits, so we know where the border is on that? Okay?
What time do you expect to be out there if the commission approves?
I don't know, I gotta make sure he's still awake.
And we,
Probably 9 o'clock.
he'll call me though, right? Well, we can talk about.
Okay. Anyone else?
Wrap up?
Okay. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate your comments, and so do we think it's beneficial to get that material removed? So, thank you.
So,
We have additional.
did you
oh,
vote that it was a minor modification?
Okay, someone make that a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
So he needs to stake the areas that he's gonna excavate
Yep.
and give me a call of when you're gonna be out there?
Yep.
And then if the area expands from what it is now, it has to be revisited?
If it expands, it costs me more money, so.
Yeah.
Claire?
We want the results. Did you get back?
There'll
Let
be a
us-
report that will be filed.
And we want that back as soon as you get it, through email or telephone call or whatever, so we know what's the story is.
Thank you.
Okay? All right. We have minutes from March 14th.
Well, we want to make
We
sure
don't.
we do the enforcement
Okay.
order.
Okay.
Wow. Oh, we still have them here.
No.
Okay.
Right, so you have the
Yeah.
extension request?
Any issues on the enforcement orders?
Yeah, wait a minute, so before you leave.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yeah,
Um,
enforcement order.
We have, still have issues at Summer Street?
I talked about those at the last meeting.
Yeah, we did, and we gave him a deadline of April, I can't remember, to get me the plan, and that he's gonna be on the agenda for the 11th.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Okay. Okay.
I don't want to be scolded every night I come here, you know, I'm a friendly guy. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good night. And we covered 1900 Main Street, so,
You guys gonna sign those for both Main Streets
Yeah.
right now?
You do. Those are the forms from
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah, just
we got
delayed.
two.
Just
Okay.
delayed. We're
Circulation.
gonna have a major signing party right now.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Jeez.
We need to call the police.
No, but does anyone have some Excedrin?
Oh, I got two of them, so in a while I forget.
Yeah. You gonna referee?
We made a quick exit.
Okay, what are we signing?
You just signed the ones that you approved earlier, the determination and
We have requests for
the
extensions.
amendment. Yep, I have them right here.
Right, the request for extensions, lot 17 Arlington Lane, DP 315843. And then extend, that's one of them, that's in Brush Hill subdivision.
Any reason not to?
Nope.
So we'll move lot 17 for an 12-month extension.
I'll move it.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion 500.
And then the second one is lot 18 Arlington Lane, 315831, also in Brush Hill subdivision.
So we'll move that.
I'll move it.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, 600. What did we just do here?
Can I continue with board comments while you're signing?
Why not?
So for board comments, there's planning board request for the revised plan for 763, 765 Main Street. And that's the plan that you guys saw tonight with the amended order conditions.
That's, okay, what's...
So we can just tell them that you approve the amended order of conditions. That project?
No, that's not.
That's not it? Is it your phone?
Yeah, that's for, this is for Pulte.
No,
Pulte's
that's-
East Street. Oh, okay.
Main Street, that's,
I wrote this wrong.
Did I get wrong on the agenda? That's possible.
Main Street, 763, 765, Main Street.
What is that?
That's not Gloucester.
yeah,
Yes, it is.
that's Gloucester.
Yeah, it's glasses.
Alright.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Okay, so that's,
What's that? And then the second one is Nickel Pond Lane, East Street, which is the subdivision which is coming before the commission again next, on the 25th. But this is for an alternative water loop. So they want to come in another way and loop it. It's not going to impact the wetlands at all. It's not going to fill wetlands or go through wetlands or anything.
they're coming back to us with that.
They haven't finished with us yet, so they're still on our agenda for the 25th.
We can tell them they're on our agenda.
Hmm?
They're on our meeting
They're still
for next meeting.
continued.
Yeah,
I did email Bob. but I didn't know.
okay.
On the 25th.
Uh,
And the 100 Rustic Road Planning Board is for a 2-lot subdivision, which they will have to come before us, because there's wetlands associated with that.
Where's
100 Rustic
Road?
Road. Rustic Road is on the other side of Route 1,
Is that over by,
down
Bear?
by McDonald's.
Yeah, okay, all right. So they're gonna file with us,
They have to file.
okay. All right, is that it? Anything else?
I believe so, that's it. So on April 11th, it'll be all MBTA Keolis filings for culvert replacement, double track, and the Summer Street crossing redo.
You gonna put a tunnel in?
No, they're just gonna make improvements to Summer Street so that people don't get killed.
So did you say that's the only thing we're doing next time?
There's 3 different filings for,
So it's all Keolis next time?
yeah, all MBTA, yep. 3 different filings. I wasn't sure how many people were gonna come because the double track runs from like Norfolk through.
Oh, yeah, no, it's great. Are they gonna have like another 3 folders each? You know,
More green folders,
giant,
yes.
thick green folders?
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice. You like those
There are
folders,
3
huh?
different consultants doing the 3 different aspects of the project.
Were they doing the double track?
They're putting in a second track on the Franklin line, which goes from Norfolk through Walpole to Foxborough Stadium.
Oh, the Franklin line doesn't run to Foxborough.
Doesn't go,
No, it doesn't run to Foxborough.
Well, but it's,
But it has to do
the stadium is gonna be part of the
It has to
Franklin
do with
line.
turning the trains
Oh, is
around
it-
fast.
Yeah, it branches off here in Walpole,
Right.
at the
They
station.
call it the Franklin line.
It'll make it more efficient.
They're putting in a second track.
2 tracks. They're gonna have to make a double at crossing in South
Well,
Walpole.
there is a double track for part of the line.
Yeah,
But to be
and
able
What
to bring the
happens when it
trains,
gets down into, past Norfolk Central, it turns into one track, and a lot of times the train has to stop
Right.
at Norfolk Central, wait for the other train to go by.
Yeah.
right,
so,
so this is gonna turn them around faster.
Yeah.
So they have the right of way, they just have to put in the second track. Some drainage improvements. Okay,
All right.
so we're all set?
I think
Yeah.
we need to.
Can we move to
Jim-
adjourn?
Not yet. Jim, I think they've made a point that you need to be a little more courteous. Your point is, you're correct, and it was very annoying when she stood up and said, oh, can you turn us off?
Have you moved to adjourn?
All
Yeah, I thought you.
right, move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Are we off?